Hey everybody, welcome to Lorebeards 40,000. We have a special guest today.
Hi.
This is a special episode of Lorebeards 40K because we are doing one on the power of faith, and we have a guest, and we're doing it on Wednesday. So this is kind of like a trifecta.
Sorry, well, I was really focused on getting a tiny piece onto her shoulder pad.
You know, miniatures require focus to get some of those things put together. I've been there.
But it is done.
You know, Vera, actually, I should tell you, I have a friend of mine who is a game master and a player, and he's excellent at both. And when he's gaming, he is actually painting minis or assembling minis. And he says it's actually great because his visual focus is on the model, but his other senses are tuned to the game.
No, absolutely. I was the same way as a student, always drawing and stuff, doodling. So, one language center of the brain, one visual center, etc. It works.
So funnily enough, we usually have comments by now. I'm hoping that we are live and everyone is seeing us and hearing us.
Hello.
We're not screaming into the void. Let's hope.
If nothing else, it wouldn't be the first time.
Let me just go ahead and jump over to YouTube to make sure we are in fact broadcasting.
I think it's because I accidentally put it for an hour ahead because I was trying to figure out what time it was.
Okay, we are live. We are being watched. Okay. It's all good. It's all good. Hey, thanks.
I have faith it'll all work. Get it?
So tech is
yeah,
because that's the topic today is the power of faith. Hey everybody, we're talking about the power of faith today. So tech likes us to introduce ourselves, so why don't we start with you two ladies, and I will jump in at the end.
All right, Vera, you first.
Yeah, hi, I'm Vera. I am usually over on the Lorebeards and RPGs section of things and the book club, but today I have stopped in to talk metaphysics in 40K. I am an online thing doer. I VTube. I write for the Warhammer fantasy RPGs, recently, like the Dark Elf book and stuff. So, not on the 40K side, but I am familiar with it. I got into RPGs through Dark Heresy and am a big fan. So, glad to be here. Hello.
We're fighting those stupid Dark Elves that you worked on in the current campaign.
You're welcome. Enjoy.
Thanks.
Actually,
I hate it.
It's actually really good because the original Dark Elves were kind of like very bland. Now they have flavor and I love them.
Yeah, I wrote the Cainites and I took pains to make them all like unreasonable and mad in entirely different ways. It was a lot of fun. So
that is one of my favorite factions in all of like AOS is the Daughters of Cain. And so the Dark Elves, which if I say this, AOS people are going to hate me, but the Dark Elves that became the Daughters of Cain, because somebody's going to be like, well, actually, they didn't. But you get what I mean. The Daughters of Cain have always been like my favorite thing. So once my current character either gets retired or dies, the chances of her living through the campaign very low. But I'm looking forward to playing a Dark Elf. I can't wait.
Well, enjoy.
What flavor do they have? Garlic or umami or?
It's actually just paprika.
Okay. Spicy. Yeah. Caliente, as Deadpool would say.
There's just that whole there's the whole joke about how I'm not going to say it here, but somebody knows the whole cinnamon thing with drow, I'm sure. If you ever want to look up a really weird thing that was written for D&D, look up like drow and taste. I'm not going to really write in that.
Okay, now I have to Google this.
Hi, everyone. I'm Northern Queen Alexis. I am a YouTuber occasionally. I am into way too much. Wasn't it cinnamon? Yes, it was cinnamon. And it's tiefling, not drow. You are correct. I get those confused. But hi, everyone. I'm Northern Queen Alexis. I am a Viking reenactor. I am a all-around Warhammer enthusiast. I actually just did a huge painting commission in 2 days for a buddy that just went to a tournament. He's going to the GT this weekend, and I'm wishing him well. I am skipping out on it because I have family stuff to do. and family is a bit more important. There are 7 car movies about family, so
Yeah.
Still, they're not. I can't. It shocks me that they're not sponsored by the Olive Garden, because when you're at the Olive Garden, you're family. Why? I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. They should just.
It actually does. You are correct.
I'm imagining Vin Diesel like gathering all of his guys, and they're hanging out like in an Olive Garden after hours,
doing burnouts around Olive Garden.
Yeah, I think the car is inside.
I guess I should introduce myself now. I am Ross Watson. I'm a game designer and author. I've worked on a whole bunch of books for Warhammer 40,000 role-playing, and I've written a bunch of stuff for White Dwarf, and I wrote a bunch of stuff for different 40k video games like Battlefleet Gothic Armada, which is on sale now. It's part of the Warhammer Classics on Steam.
Did you see what they added to Fire Warrior?
No, what did they add?
There's a message at the beginning of the game that basically says this game is in canon.
Oh, no way. Wild.
The contents of this game do not reflect current lore. AKA, this game is not canon because they don't want to try to explain a demonically possessed Tau Fire Warrior.
That's a big step for like whether it's canonical or not. They very rarely do something like that. Wow. Okay, I'm going to factor that into any kind of canon discussions in the future. All right, so that's who I am, and that's what I know about Warhammer 40k. Are you ladies ready to talk about some faith?
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
I thought I might just introduce the basic concepts of it. Faith is... We're not exactly sure. Like, the lore is not clear on what it is, but we can tell you this. Sisters of Battle have rules for it in the tabletop. And in the tabletop rules, it can create supernatural effects. In the actual lore, people have returned from the dead, essentially teleported across vast distances, sometimes to do this. They have not only returned from the dead, they have banished demons, they have deflected attacks that would kill just about anybody else. The power of faith is a thing that canonically in the rule books and the codexes exists as a supernatural force. However, it is unclear how this supernatural force functions as related to things like psychic powers, which are another form of supernatural force in Warhammer 40,000. And it is unclear how or even if faith interacts with the warp, which is the source of psychic powers and most supernatural effects in the setting. And we know that... Oh, go ahead, please.
It sometimes interacts when the writers want it to, and then sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah,
and it depends on the writer.
In the Pariah Nexus, it seems separate. Like, faith is not affected by this. The power of faith is not dulled in the same way as the powers of the warp are. But then we have Sanctic demonology, which is overtly a psychic power. So,
yeah. In fact, in the Pariah Nexus, they make a big deal out of Illumino Zaris makes a big deal about cutting off powers of the warp, and then Ethereal Stern is still Super Saiyan, and he's just like, how?
Yeah, Stern is Stern is like the most extreme example because she's called the Heretic Saints, and her abilities seem to be more closely akin to psychic abilities than most expressions of faith, but at the same time are definitely not psychic powers. So yeah, it gets weird. It's going to get weird today, folks.
Now, I do want to mention one thing about Ethereal Stern. In some settings, in some time in the lore, she was a psyker. This was for a brief moment where she had psychic powers and she could cast Smite. But unlike any other psyker in the setting, her Smite never caused her to perils. But that was only in one edition of Warhammer, and it was changed from her not being a psyker to being a psyker to not being a psyker.
Yeah.
So As of now, she's not a psyker, but can still do smite.
I want to be really clear, guys. We're talking about fictional faith. This is not about. We're not talking about faith in the real world. We're talking about faith in the grim darkness of the far future. So I can already see some of you typing. Just stop. We're not talking about real world faith.
But affirmatively in 40K, faith works. The power of faith does accomplish incredible things. It is distinct and a little strange.
Mm-hmm.
Should we read a couple super chats before we dive in?
Yeah, of course. I think we just got the 2 right now.
Biofoot says, "To whom do the space fishmen pray?"
Okay, so there is an actual answer to this. There is a I don't know what to call them, a gang on Necromunda that worships Orlac, that worships an underwater god that is definitely not just a Cthulhu reference. It 100% is just a Cthulhu reference. Cthulhu is in 40K.
It's the DLAQ, DELAQUE, I believe is how you pronounce it.
Oh, sorry, I said Orlac.
Yeah, it's fine.
I combined like 2 names there.
We all understood what you meant. But yeah, Delac is the name of the gang. Biofoot, thank you so much for the super chat. And in case you don't know, super chats are the best way to keep this show going and keep the hosts producing great content for you. So we appreciate all of them. Very grateful. And then we got this one. Vera, do you want to read this one?
Yeah, Stevie Lucas notes, last stream, Lilith should be Avatar of Eldrazer, Lord of Blades. Also moonlights as Hustler 1, mech pilot of 9-ball, Master of the Arena.
This is in reference to, we did a show on the witch cults of the Drukhari, and we talked about Lilith Hesperax, who is the witch of all witches. And one of the viewers brought up the point that she could be a reincarnated Eldari goddess, and we started talking about who that could be. And Stephen Lucas is giving us yet another possibility, is that it could be Eldrazi. Hustler 1, mech pilot 9-ball. What is that from a reference? I'm not picking that up.
No idea.
I am a big fan of pulling the pantheons of the gods together for the elves, though. I think that if you use the 40K Kane lore and tie it to the lore from fantasy, you get a really complete picture. Big fan of that.
I really wish they would do that. I really wish the writers were brave enough to actually tell us what the hell the Eldar gods are.
If you read it as one big story, it makes a lot of sense.
Speaking of gods, we're going to talk about faith. And I thought I might start us off with just the most debated theories of what it might be. And I'll just briefly break those down and then let you two go crazy.
Okay.
If that works.
Yes.
So one possibility. Again, these are sourced from the web, sourced from people talking about faith in Warhammer 40,000. So this is not official by any means, but this is just kind of what people think faith might be. The first option is that faith is really just a pure version of psychic powers. It is warp energy that is distilled through the Emperor and then granted to some of his followers. Now, obviously, the Pariah Nexus issue, where things that would shut down psychic powers do not shut down faith, would contradict this. But that's the first theory. The second theory is that it is something called true divinity, a power from beyond the warp. Essentially, it's some kind of power or ability that it has enough psychic pressure to punch through things like nulls or the warp, the pylons, kind of like an alpha class psyker. And then the third option is that the Emperor actually is the fifth chaos god, that the Emperor has achieved a form of divinity, and that the saints are his demons, and the Legion of the Damned is his Neverborn.
I hate that theory.
I love that theory.
I'm putting it out there that I hate that theory. I view the Emperor's demons as separate from the warp. I view the Emperor as a living god, closely similar to Gorkamork, and more similar to the Eldar gods than the Catan and the Chaos gods.
There's one more. I'm just get this last one out.
Okay.
The last theory about faith is that it's really just a placebo, that there is no supernatural power, that all the miracles are hype or a madman or bureaucracy has decided to turn this into a propaganda piece, essentially. And that this is obviously goes contradicted by the living Saint Celestine and all the things that Saint Celestine's done.
Yeah.
At a bare minimum. But there you go. Those are the theories. Please proceed.
Okay. So, where to start? All right. Okay. So, what I believe faith is it is a soul-based power that comes from within, that comes from beings that have been touched by the Emperor, because they seem to do the same types of things that the Emperor is capable of, or they emit the same glowing radiance that banishes demons that the Emperor is known for or has done. Such as when the Emperor rose his sword in Master Mankind and slew 10,000 demons. Which was definitely not just Aaron Densky Bowden having the Emperor use a Tetsaiga and use the backlash wave. 100% wasn't that, and I definitely did not ask him that. There goes Kovu. The golden radiance of the Emperor and the Sisterhood is very tight-knit. We know that the Custodians actually like the Sisters of Battle, and Custodians hate everything in the Imperium. Like, they hate what the Imperium has become. They hate Space Marines. They hate traitors. They don't like the Guardsmen. They don't like the bureaucracy. They don't... But Sisters of Battle, they're just like, yeah, they're cool. And I have we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, or actually I think like 2 weeks ago, when we talked about the Sisters of Battle. There were 6 Sisters of Battle. Each of them got to see the Emperor. Now, whether that was the Emperor as the avatar that sits on the Golden Throne or the creature that is behind the Golden Throne, and that's a whole theory in itself. Regardless, they came out and they knew the truth, and each one of them went on to make the Sisters of Battle, which is a torture death cult that makes sisters that are capable of doing miracles so long as a significant number of them die in the process. Death seems to be very tied to the Emperor, because it is, and his faith is extremely important, which is really contradictory to what the Emperor was in 30K. But in 40K, he's just like, nah, I'm cool. I appear sometimes. I possess my son on occasion. You know, it's cool now. But the sisters manifesting reality augmenting powers, because that's what it is. They can come back to life. They can teleport. They can move faster than light, even faster than warp travel, which we know is way faster than light. They can instantly resurrect. They can set souls ablaze. They can banish demons. They can, let's see, what are the things that Celestine has done? Pull a demon that represents the end of all things into her chest, order a custodian to kill her, then come directly back to life and make that custodian question whether or not the Emperor is a god. That happened in Our Martyred Lady. There's been a ton of stuff, and even Dead Sisters artifacts are strong enough to destroy demons. Like, if you pick up the sword of Saint Celestine, which, by the way, there's a lot of swords of Saint Celestine because her body doesn't dematerialize. They actually carry it around. It's very weird, but they mention this in a book. She sees herself dead. Just the artifacts of the saint is enough to combat demons, and even Gilliman had to question whether or not his dad was a god, because during the Plague War incident, he couldn't push through the Death Guard, yet a bunch of hobos in robes with a train chanting the Emperor is a god barraged through them. And he's just like, I'm sorry, what? oh, shoot, go, reinforce him. And even when the Gilliman himself did his act of faith, which is igniting the Emperor's sword, because all the way in that book, he never ignited the sword. He never knew how, which is weird because his artwork previous of him in prior engagements with the sword on fire, but, you know, whatever. Sure. But when he accepted that the Emperor was a god, or at least has some type of divinity, the sword went ablaze and he destroyed a big scary Nurgle demon. So faith is inherently tied to your beliefs in the Emperor and possibly how strong your spirit is. Now, is that consistent across all of the lore? Absolutely not.
Just to back up Alexis here on the statement that the Custodes seem to have a liking for the Sisters. Not only are they Custodes deeply tied in with the origin of the Sisters of Battle, but even very recently, when the new Canoness Superia was anointed, they gave her a special lance that they had been keeping for just such a time. So it is definitely backed up in the lore that the Custodes do have some sort of special relationship with the Sisters of Battle.
Which, by the way, I absolutely love.
No, it's a good thing. They should have somebody they like, right?
Well, it's like they like the Sisters of Silence, but that's the talons of the Emperor. But I imagine, like, after this is a slight tangent, I'll move on back to Faith in just a second. But I imagine after the Sisters of Silence got banished from Terra, which we still don't know why they were, but we're gonna find out in the newest books. They kind of were just like, I miss my little sisters.
So Vera, what are your thoughts so far?
I think it is noteworthy that the power of faith manifests seemingly just from the Emperor. Right? Like, this is sort of a unique phenomenon in how it works. Like, I would not say that, like, WoG energy is a similar thing, really. I would say that there's a distinct quality here that is tied to Biggie himself. I agree that it has to do with, like, distinct faith in his divinity. I think it is safe to say that the Emperor in particular is a vector for this, right? Whatever is going on with it, that is the source, the like turning point that lets it manifest in the world.
To back up what you said about the orcs having a reality augmenting power as well, the Wa energy or the Great Green in more recent lore is actually just them pulling energy from the warp itself. It's a lot of energy because all of them can do it because every orc can pull energy. It's just usually they channel it through weird boys or prophets, which is possible. And they use that to change reality, like teleporting across half the galaxy or knowing exactly where the greatest war is or resurrecting Makari into another grot because he could do that.
Yeah, like, I think that it's categorically different because it's sort of a natural consequence of them being really stoked and really psychically active, as opposed to the way more deliberate, way more orthodox power of faith you see in the Imperium.
Here's what's ironic. The lore tells us specifically that the Emperor's presence is visible in the warp. That's what the Astronomicon is.
Mm-hmm.
And the lore tells us unequivocally that the Emperor was the strongest psyker who ever lived.
Mm-hmm.
So if the power is coming from the Emperor, who, again, is the strongest psyker who ever lived, and his power is certainly reflected in the warp, how is that not just warp, just energy from the warp or psychic powers? How is it different from those two things? Or is it?
Well, this is where the theory that Alexis doesn't like comes in, because if the Emperor is beginning to be embodied as a divine entity in the warp that has his own domain and plays by his own rules, then suddenly you get to make a lot of exceptions, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So to answer that real quick, I like that the Emperor is becoming a god. I still don't view him as a chaos god because he's an anathema to the chaos gods. I think he's an intruder into their realm.
I think he is a god of order.
Yeah, I could see that.
And I don't think that's something that he wanted, but I think it is shaped by, again, faith. Because the version of him that's been receiving this feverish worship by every psyker that humanity has, except like the radical witches and so on, for about 10,000 years, is the version that is produced. Yeah, like the kind of emperor you get is the kind you wish for, right? Because he's being shaped through psychic energy, through sacrifice, through like constant sacrifice. If you think about the rituals happening in front of the Golden Throne every day, chaos cults wish they could do that.
Mm-hmm.
It would be in tune with 40K's grimdark aesthetic for the Emperor to be just a version of the Chaos Gods that is slightly different. Like his axis is order instead of chaos, but following a similar trajectory. That would be within the remit of grimdark.
So
That's my thesis, sort of, is that because the worship of the Emperor is so regimented, so oppressive, so thoroughly
horrific.
orthodox in its intent and its methodology, that is what he's been shaped into, and he might struggle with that, but this is the fate he tried to avoid and the one he is now stuck with.
To go along with that, I think throughout the heresy, the Emperor knew that this was an inevitability, and he tried his best to avoid it up until he needed to kill Horus, where he had to discard his humanity because he knew what was going to come. He knew all the sacrifice and all the death and all the horrific things that are going to be done in his name. But in order to defeat chaos, he needed to do it. He needed to sacrifice that piece of his soul.
Quite interesting and possible. And we do have a few super chats I'd like to read before we get further, because they're going to get lost if we don't. We've got one from Stephen Lucas who says, Armored Core reference, that is 9-ball. So that's the reference we were worrying about earlier. It's Armored Core. Thank you, Stephen Lucas. I am not an Armored Core guy, but that's a cool game.
Armored Core is a game that my buddy has been trying to get me into, and it's super, super cool, but I don't know what it is. The robots.
It's fun. It's fun.
Would you like to read this one, Vera?
Sure. Stephen Lucas, thank you so much. Would idea Legion of the Damned if reintroduced in 11th, parasiting of the Grey Knights, using necromancy to summon them, allied forces like Kroot to Tau. Okay.
So
Legion of the Damned as a summonable unit from the Grey Knights would be rad. I
like that. Like an attaché, right?
I don't hate it.
To go along with this, it's either Eye of Night or Hand of Darkness. I can't remember which. The one with Greyfax, where she goes with a bunch of Grey Knights into the warp to deal with Baba Yaga and get one of the sacred artifacts. They run into a dead Grey Knight, the one that died fighting Abaddon in the Gothic Wars. I can't remember his name. I apologize. But he comes back to life. Like, he magics himself back to life. And I get it, he's in the warp and he's probably attached to his own armor. But so there is a stand for this to be like, well, maybe he came back as a Legion of the Damned.
Maybe. By the way, Eye of Night and Hand of Darkness are both artifacts from the original Battlefleet Gothic setting, both of the Gothic War. They're old school, and I appreciate them greatly in involving them in this whole thing.
Yep.
And then we got one from Kurin-Shima who says, can you depower Khorne by teaching Imperial citizens to think of him as a giant red puppy, similar to Clifford the Big Red Dog?
Okay. All right. So, kinda. The Chaos Gods in the Heresy got so desperate because they were being starved out by the Emperor that they unified, which is something they don't do. They hate each other almost as much as they hate everything else. But the Emperor posed a significant threat to their existence that they bound together to fight. So if you actually convinced the entirety of everybody in the galaxy that Khorne is actually not the god of murder, but a puppy, yeah, you could take away power from him.
I would say not all power, but yeah, it would be effective. Like, because the Chaos Gods inhabit conceptual ranges, great violence and warfare would still empower Khorne, but you can kind of co-opt things. Like theoretically, Slaanesh could pivot anything excessive toward its own interests, right? Like draw strength from that. But in practice, excessive bloodshed is often cornate in nature, right?
Yep.
I would argue that the primal nature of the Chaos Gods would tend to override any organized effort to try and soften their edges. It's something that's possible. I think you're right, it's possible, but I think it's very difficult because the urge to kill is kind of a lizard brain, it's deep in our psyche. So
you don't just get the urge to kill things and then act upon that.
I mean, civilization is literally us coming out of untold millennia of the Stone Age to say maybe we shouldn't just kill each other and work together for something. And that's only been a short period of time in the historic scale.
Well, you see this in the Faithful of the Emperor too, who kill for the Emperor, and then I think in Dark Tide is skulls for the Golden Throne and so on. So there's this kind of perversion that happens, but it can work either way, right?
I do love that in some of the Sister of Battle books, they mention other ways of worshiping the Emperor that are deemed okay. And one of them is a dung beetle, but others are actual blood cults, like the death cult assassins, where they'll run around screaming skulls for the Emperor, blood for his throne, and they're just like, are these guys loyal? And they're just stabbing allies and everything, and they're just point us to the enemies. And it's I think so.
Lastly, we've got one from Stephen Lucas. Vera, do you want to read this one?
Like the idea that the current Imperial faith was Lorgar's revenge. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not the Emperor's wishes, right?
That's a funny way to look at it, is that Lorgar's revenge is the ecclesiarchy and the Ministorum.
I have a big theory about this. Okay, because this actually has to do with faith. This is on topic and everything. I think that Malkador, after finding out about the Imperial faith and protecting the living saint at the time in the Imperial Palace, where then the writers completely forgot about her. I mean, she was kept there safe for all eternity. The writers forgot. But anyway, they took her into the Imperial Palace. She was doing acts of faith. She turned Garrow into a Super Saiyan capable of fighting a fully powered demon Mortarion. And I know some people are like, oh, but Mortarion just fought Jagatai and he was weakened. Demons don't operate like that. They're either at full strength or nothing. That's it. Once they finish a fight, they're just okay, we're back to normal. Keep fighting. Unless there's an external factor that is limiting them, like Blackstone. Or psychic powers. Or force weapons, which Garrow has none of. But Garrow, using a living saint as basically a battery, was capable of fighting Mortarion. Didn't stop him technically by stabbing him, but died in the process. She was kept into the throne and everything. But the Emperor and Malkador and what is his name? The custodian. What's his name? Constantine Valdor.
Valdor.
All three of them knew about the Imperial faith, viewed it as a problem, but didn't view it as a problem worth stopping at the time. I think Malkador knew it had to be a thing and just steered it correctly. Instead of it worshipping the Chaos Gods like Lorgar wanted, he steered it in the path of worshipping the Emperor.
The person you're talking about is Euphrates Keeler.
Yes, Euphrates Keeler.
The first, technically the first Imperial Saints. Certainly one of the first wielders of faith as we know it in Warhammer 40,000.
And possibly also Celestine in one of her previous lives.
Maybe?
Because she casually mentions that. Also, Celestine mentions she was the daughter of the Emperor, which could mean that she was a physical daughter of the Emperor, or, just viewed the Emperor as our father, as in praying to them. Yeah, Celestine is very, very weird, and a lot of her lore contradicts a lot of things that are in the... Yeah, Celestine's all over the place, and I absolutely love her.
Do we get into the sensei now, or?
Oh no, God, please no.
Okay, so let me talk about how Greyfax mentions that in a Celestine book. Greyfax casually mentions that Celestine might be a star child, and she stopped looking for them after she found Celestine, which could mean one of three things. One, that they don't exist. That's probably, the intent is that she couldn't find them, but the living saints are living saints. Greyfax also believed that the living saints were actually heretics until she met Celestine. It definitely was not a, hey, I was looking for this my whole life and then I found you romantic thing, which it definitely was. It's a romance story. I'm going to count it as a romance story. Let my girl be a lesbian. Anyway, and then the third is that Celestine is actually a star child or a sensei or however you want to put it. And Greyfax found one and was like, oh, I was completely wrong about them. They're actually superpowered beings that we need to protect.
So, funnily enough, I tend to look at the difference between faith and psychic powers kind of like the difference between like Spider-Man and the X-Men. Okay, like they all have superpowers, but only an expert can say those guys are mutants and Spider-Man is not a mutant, but they all have superpowers, right? Like I feel like that's kind of what we're talking about with faith and psychic powers. To a layperson, to someone who is not in the know, you might see a psyker do something and say that's miraculous, or even technology, like the Origin of the Sisters battle with Goj Van Dyer going down to their world with a refractor field and being like, it's magic, it's the light of the Emperor, and everybody's like, it's actually just your refractor field, buddy. What are you doing?
By the way, that is like the only time in the lore that our force field actually works. That's written in a book. That is the only time that I've ever actually seen a force field described as working. And we know that Space Marine chapter masters and commissars and characters and officers all have them. And
the Rosarius is the specific item.
I mean, different types of force fields.
Right.
Oh, sorry. There's one, the Azrael book where he's fighting Karn the Betrayer, and the writer doesn't want them to kill each other, so he keeps teleporting them away.
But I think you see my point, though, is like, to the average guy on the street, Spider-Man and the X-Men are both superheroes, and it's all just superpowers. Mm-hmm. But to like a Sentinel robot, okay, those are mutants, and that guy over there is not a mutant. And we're in this case, we're the Sentinel robots. I'm losing control of this metaphor. We are the Sentinel robots who are able to look at and determine, like, okay, this is faith and this is not faith, and we're trying to parse that out.
So is this the part we talk about Sanctic demonology?
My absolute favorite psychic discipline.
Was it you that wrote Holocaust as in a psychic power?
Probably. I don't remember for sure. Maybe.
I do love that GW has kept that in the lore. Like, has referenced it multiple times in the lore. They're like, no, this is a psychic power. We need you to know that the Imperium is evil.
There are no good guys in 40K. Vera, please expound upon what is Sanctic demonology and why is it relevant to this discussion?
Yeah, Sanctic demonology is a school of psychona that was introduced, I believe, in Dark Heresy 2nd edition, that is pretty well devoted to fighting off the powers of demons. It is a discipline that revolves around a direct connection to the Emperor and calling on him to manifest all sorts of sacred effects, which are particularly effective against the corrupt.
See, one of the things that we know about the Emperor from the novels, not so much the rulebooks or codexes, but in the novels, we know that the Chaos Gods consider the Emperor and his effects and his radiance as anathema. It is directly opposed to them in some manner or another, and seems to nullify their powers and abilities in the same, like, it seems to be supreme if that ability is there and chaos stuff is there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and like it's not overt that they're like drawing directly from the Emperor. There's like a one power it's called like Word of the Emperor, and it lets them speak with his voice. Like maybe that's just faith that that's the case that lets them do this, but it is kind of that essence, and it does have a powerful effect over the corrupt, over demons, and so on. So
it's a very powerful thing, but I always viewed it as them pulling energy from the warp, maybe even from his realm, because we do know that the Emperor has his own realm within the warp. Thank you, Celestine. I think that's where they're drawing their power from, and they believe that it is a psychic power. Or it is a psychic power, but it's not being drawn. Okay, hang on. I can explain this.
Say the word. Say the line. Say it.
It depends. But I think the Sisters of Battle draw their power from an innate connection to the Emperor through their lineage that saw the Emperor, where the Emperor put something within the Sister of Battle souls. But I think that the Sanctic demonology or powers come from his domain, where his domain is in the warp itself, the lighthouse that is the Emperor. He controls a certain amount of the warp itself, where he keeps captured demons, which is a whole nother thing where we could talk about how he has 4 greater demons that each trial Celestine when she's depowered, and she has to beat each one of them, find her faith focus and her reasoning for worshiping the Emperor, and then she pops back into the material realm, and she has to do that every time she dies, which seems like an inconvenience. Like, just let her keep her memories, maybe. Which, by the way, Celestine comes out each and every single time without her memories until she regains them in the material realm, which is a weird thing. But I think that the lighthouse is where they're drawing their power from versus the Emperor himself, if that makes sense.
So I think there's something to that. I think what complicates it is that Sanctic demonology is the signature discipline of the Grey Knights.
Mm-hmm.
And that's about as direct a tie as you can get to the Emperor.
Yeah, considering that they are made out of the gene seed of the Emperor, whatever that means.
I mean, that's the rumor. I don't know if you can say that like 100%.
Let's have faith
that it's in their current lore. It annoys me because the Emperor doesn't, like, as far as we know, the Emperor's only augmetics are his bionic eye, which he may or may not have gotten after he died. Which we don't know when he got that bionic.
It's notable too that Sanctic demonology seems to like be a desperate temptation for people. Like the part of the lore behind it is that the study can like lure psychers into non-Sanctic demonology, which is a fast track to corruption. So
that is true.
Yeah,
but I mean, who doesn't want a little corruption? You might
get
fun out of it.
It is said that the Grey Knight's gene seed is based on the Emperor's own genome. So maybe. I'm going to say maybe.
To tie it back to faith, Malkador was religious. He's the one that started the Grey Knights. So, power of religion again.
Possibly. We do have a couple of super chats I'd like to grab, including one from Twitch. Let's do that one first. Skara, Prince of the Parade. Question for you guys. How would you imagine Archaon interacting with people like Horus or the Emperor or Abaddon, given that he, I'm assuming Archaon, is a god killer, has destroyed realities before after killing the fantasy universe, and despite being part of chaos, being so rage-filled, even they can barely control him or keep him on board?
Is Archaon aware that he killed gods in the end times in AOS? Because I feel like that's actually important in this discussion. Because if not, we have
to take... told that yes, I'm being told that from chat.
Okay. Then I don't know. I think the Imperium would try to fight him as an enemy. Like, even Horus, fully demonic, would be like, nah, bet I could kill you. And then would subsequently lose because he's not as powerful as Archaon.
I imagine Archaon meeting Abaddon would be a lot like the Spider-Man meme where they're just pointing at each other. Hey,
yeah, because they are each other.
Hey, quit pointing. Don't you know pointing is rude? You pointed at me first.
And what we know about Abaddon is he has killed lesser gods, but that's all we know. It's just a small paragraph stating that he has killed gods before? Is that, did he actually destroy a god, or did he state that he did because he's not religious?
Okay, here's a funny story. I think the meeting I would love to see would be between Archeon and Luna Wolves era Horus, because Archeon would have a really interesting perspective on starting out as a champion of quote unquote good, right? Like, because Archeon was a warrior priest, a Sigmar, like starting out. So I imagine they would have a really interesting conversation about how fate and destiny can change your path to be 180 degrees from where you thought it was. Certainly the philosophy aspects of it would be a really fascinating discussion. Post Sons of Horus, or actually post Davin, when Horus gets corrupted by chaos, they would have a much different conversation. I still don't. I think Horus Ascended would probably say that he is much like an Everchosen, but there's only ever been one in 10,000 years.
Yeah.
Which is a very different kind of situation where Archeon's been chosen several times, if I'm not mistaken, to be the champion of all the Chaos Gods. Maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know enough. I know Be'lakor tried to get chosen by all 4 Chaos Gods.
Well, he's ever chosen, right?
Yeah. And then he tried to become a god, but in 40K, Be'lakor didn't try to become a god. He's just kind of a dude.
More like never chosen, am I right?
Ah,
damn. The Emperor meeting Archeon. I don't think that would be. It would probably be a very short meeting. I'm just gonna say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they would aura farm for about 2 lines of conversation and then fight.
Yeah. I wonder which one of them would initiate the fight. Huh.
All right, and then we've got this super chat over here. And Vera, would you like to read this one?
Yeah, Stephen Lucas, thank you so much. Lorgar shaped the current cult to accelerate the time bomb of a second god birth, but for humans that his dad tried to stop. He will kill humanity.
That's an interesting outlook on it. I don't believe Lorgar had that type of vision. I think Lorgar was really just writing down his thoughts, and it is a commentary more on how religion adapts to the needs of the culture rather than this guy being able to see that far into the future and say, okay, I'm setting things up in this. Lorgar is just not that kind of a schemer typically. So I see where you're saying that, but I don't know if I agree.
Also, weirdly enough, Lorgar didn't write it with the intent of it becoming trying to make people fall to chaos or anything. He actually did want people to worship the Emperor. So he did his job. I mean, even Gilliman commented on the Lectitio Divinitatis, which is the book, and how it reeks of Lorgar's writing, and that Gilliman wants to fix the writing in the book, but he doesn't want to change it too much because he knows that the sisters pose one of the biggest threats in the galaxy, which is also why he doesn't want to get rid of them.
It's really the Ministorum he fears, because the influence and the power of the Ministorum is second only to the Emperor in the Imperium of Man.
Also, the Ministorum actually won versus Horus, who did not. Just thanks. Sisters won.
All right, so getting back to the discussion of faith, we all have different ideas on what it might be, but we know what it can do. It can, it could resurrect the dead, which that's big. That's a very big and important thing. But typically,
can I add on to that really quickly?
Yeah, go ahead.
When it comes to resurrecting the dead, it's not just the dead. It's beyond that, because it can resurrect creatures or women that have been dead for centuries. Just being in the presence of a dead saint and fighting for them and having faith in the Emperor can bring that saint back through you in your time of dying to kill an enemy. or in some cases destroy a greater demon, and then die.
In the Tranche War in Dark Heresy, there's a guy, an unnamed guardsman, who is said to have risen from the dead 13 times in a row. So there you go. But I was just talking about the typically in Warhammer 40K.
You didn't hear no bell.
You didn't hear no bell. The warp is kind of the engine of belief. The warp, the immaterium or the Empyrean is also another term for it, it's a parallel dimension. It is also a hyperspace lane for faster than light travel, but it is another dimension composed entirely of energy. Yeah, it is often described as like psychic energy. It seems to be generated by and reflects emotions, thoughts, desires, and beliefs of every sentient being. Well, most sentient beings, I should say, in the material universe. Acts of rage, desire, despair, or hope, these ripple throughout the warp. And when these emotions are strong enough, concentrated enough, or widespread enough, they can coalesce into entities. This is where we get the Tau Va, which is the god of the Tau that was encountered. And it's like, hi, I'm the god of the Tau. And all the Tau are like, oh my God. And all the auxiliary troops, the ones who actually brought it into existence, are like, oh, wow, this is great. Of course, the Tau are not happy at all.
Told you.
Right? Anyway, so the Chaos Gods, they are the most extreme examples of this process. And again, I want to be clear, this is a way to look at it. The Chaos Gods are kind of created by and sustained by the emotions, collective desires, beliefs, etc., of all the sentient beings. Again, most of the sentient beings in the material universe. Time is weird in the warp, so they may have not always existed, and yet they always have existed.
Yeah, 40K is the whole. Once they were born, they have always existed.
Well, we can kind of refute that with at least the descriptions of the War in Heaven, where the warp was not like that. But anyway,
unless we ask Gav Thorpe.
Unless you ask a certain writer, yeah. But it's said that they grew from the emotional output of civilizations across millions of years. It is said that Khorne feeds on rage and bloodshed, that Nurgle feeds on despair and the acceptance of death. And if you follow that train of thought, which again is not necessarily the truth, but it is a fairly commonly accepted way of looking at the warp, then it is the emotion rather than the conscious act of worship that empowers them. Are you two still with me?
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you.
I think that certainly the emotion is a big part of it. And like, this is part of why the Imperium does a lot of the things it does, right? Like corpse starch doesn't have to be disgusting, but there's a lot in the Imperium that's centered around trying to avoid feeding into these gods, though. Like, not always effectively, right? The act of worship deliberately certainly does empower them more, perhaps, but I think it's for sure that the gods draw their strength from emotions, from facts of being, like that little lizard brain telling you to do violence, the inevitability of certain cycles, the desire for a change of station, which again the Imperium really represses, the excess in anything, which is something that's pretty hard to get for most citizens. The exception here is the regimented order itself that presents all of that, right? Because where all of these things show up in any society, in any blooming civilization, in a village, in a feudal world, right? All of these things can happen. Not so for the orthodoxy, the regimented nature, the complex systems of the Imperium as a whole. The order of it all, right?
Now, I do have my own slight theory on this one, but this goes more almost into gameplay mechanics. I think willpower plays a huge role in this. because a lot of when you're fighting a demon in Dark Heresy, weirdly enough, it is a battle of willpower. It is if you're using a force weapon, for instance, or psychic powers, it is the literal manifestation of your will that is killing the creature or banishing it. Uh, there are examples in the lore of people praying and actually banishing demons with prayer, which is them just wanting the thing to go away as hard as they can and it going away because they willed it to happen. And even in some older lore, keep in mind this is older lore, so grain of salt with this one. It's not the act of shooting a demon that is killing it, it's the act of you believing the demon is getting shot that is killing it. So it's like I'm shooting a bolt gun at a creature that is technically not there because demons occupy. I'm not going to get into the whole energy dispersion, technical quantum mechanics of how demons work in 40K. I am saving that rant to make Ross rip out everything. Needless to say that demons need you to believe that they are there for them to be there. They need something to tether to, which is typically an object or a soul or something close to a sentient being that they can then be there. And if they're in an object, they need to be able to express that they are there so that a sentient being finds it and wills it into reality. Like demonic circles and everything. Those inherently don't do anything until a sentient being goes and tries to figure it out and everything. There's actually a joke from the orcs in Dawn of War where they can't read the summoning ritual of the final boss of Dawn of War 2, and they're just like, let the humies do it. I just want a good fight. And it's literal mention of them not being able to summon a demon because they don't believe it. Where the humans summon demons because it tethers to them. So the idea that your weapons do something to demons or your words do something to demons is an act of faith. It is your willpower versus theirs.
This gets very complicated because there is one of the most debated theories amongst 40K fans is whether faith is fundamentally different from psychic powers or whether they're the same thing, just wearing different clothes. And I have a quote from a novel that I'd like to read. The novel is called Witchbringer, and the quote is from Lord Prefector Ule, who is a Scholastica Psychana official. Like, this guy knows, and he's overseen like tons of psychers. So in the terms of this specific novel, this dude knows what the hell he's talking about. But again, novels are not the primary canon, as we've talked about before. So all the grains of salt I'm trying to hand out here. But this is the quote. He says, "There is a common misconception, even amongst the gifted, that the energies of the Empyrean differ in aspect. The Immaterium, like all other realms of the universe, holds no innate spiritual predilection at all, and thus the raw, chaotic energy of the Empyrean can be no more hallowed nor corrupt than a given sea wave or breeze. And yet, unlike the ocean or the sky, the fabric of the Immaterium is inevitably, inextricably shaped by the moral composure of the soul that accesses it." So according to him, there's no difference between an act of faith and a chaos sorcerer. The difference is that the source of the power is, because it's drawn from the Immaterium, but it's shaped by the nature of the soul that is drawing forth that energy. So the intentions and your moral composure of how you access it is what shapes it.
Okay, I like that, but that's a lot of words from a heretic.
Right? Like, well, and certainly there's places in the Imperium where he would be burned alive for saying such a thing.
Like one Puritan is a radical to another Inquisitor.
Right.
I like that idea because it does go into the will of the person is what makes the act good or evil. Or in this case, it's an act and then how everyone else sees it.
Possibly, and maybe your faith in the Emperor changes your soul in such a way that when you draw the warp through it, it manifests differently. I don't know.
Well, it's also possible that all you need is enough faith and enough willpower to make the Emperor notice you.
Notice me, senpai. Ciao.
And then Senpai notices you and you become a vector for something more, which would allow for you to be a channel for things like resurrecting the dead, perhaps.
Right. So if you look at it like that, you could say that instead of opening a direct channel into the warp, the faithful are sending a signal through the warp to the Emperor. They're invoking that specific entity and drawing power back through that connection.
Yeah, it would be a case where the miracle the miracle really is the Emperor listening, which is not how it works in fantasy, not quite. There's some like direct, maybe it is kind of there, because like you do need your own contact with them. Is that a good equivalent? Because fellowship is the skill in 4th edition, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that is pretty close. Just like literally getting them to respond to that intent. That would be unique in 40k at least.
I know that in fantasy, prayers to the gods themselves and magic powers using the winds, they have no difference to the elves. They view that as the same power.
Well, that's a little different because the elves worship through conducting themselves in a fashion appropriate to the gods closest to their lifestyle, right? Mm-hmm. So they sort of show their faith and they worship by embodying those deities to begin with. A worshiper of Loak will be Trixie, right? Worshipper of Hukon will sunder things. Vol will make things. This extends to their magic as well, and the idea there is closer to the deity lending a helping hand, perhaps, shaping the spell into something that is a little bit more complete, right? The spell itself is the offering, though. So,
could that not be what the spirit is doing when channeling to the Emperor?
It could be, but you see miracles from those who don't really have psychic discipline in the same way.
That is true.
I think that's closer to Sanctic demonology, possibly, than miracles in and of themselves, right? There's some chance there. Because these spells that the elves cast, the ones that are sacred, are studied. Elves are instinctive casters. Eltherin itself is a magic language. Speaking to the wind in Eltherin in poetic ways can get effects, but there's a little more refinement to it, right? This feels more like that glimmer of faith is perceived and then rewarded by this entity that is shaped by everyone else's faith. Because I do maintain that what the Emperor has become is no longer entirely under his control.
That's very likely, I would argue. But I want to read a few super chats before we lose them off the screen here. We've got one from Ricky Chapman, who says, Archaon is the 13th ever chosen and the son of Be'lakor. That's canon. Be'lakor wanted to possess his body, but Archaon beat the crap out of him.
Man, why can't Be'lakor be this cool? Like, in 40k, Be'lakor has done, like, nothing. Like, the best thing he's done is Vashtor came and is like, I'm a new god. And Be'lakor is just like, I remembered that I'm in this setting. Okay, bye. I didn't expect to get this far, so I'm leaving.
Archaon is pretty awesome. If you want to hear more about Archaon, of course, go check out our sister channel, Lorebeards Fantasy, and listen to Andy and Ryan talk about him, the Ever-Chosen, and Be'lakor, because Be'lakor exists in both settings, although he barely exists in 40k.
I mean, they really tried to take him out of the setting. They actually severed his connection to the reality. They banished him for 1,000 years, and then, like, I don't know, that was the fall of Cadia. This is actually related because the Legion of the Damned are the ones that destroyed him, and according to the slight lore blurb, that was it. His soul was forever destroyed. And then he came back when the Archifane came out, Vashtor.
Wild. Thank you, Ricky Chapman. Appreciate you.
Somehow Be'lakor returned. I see you.
Would you like to read this one, Vera?
Yes, thank you. The revenge corrupting the modern cult, not rewriting his old world, but more zealous, and with increasing psychers, a second birth of Slaanesh soon. Oh, interesting. Okay, thank you for the chat, Stephen Lucas. So the idea here is that Slaanesh could be reborn?
I think he's saying, like the birth of Slaanesh, that the buildup of psychers in the Imperium could potentially create a new Chaos God. But I'm going to argue that that's already happened, and that's the Emperor.
I'm going to second that because in the Plague War books, the Eldar have a council where they discuss the gods, and the Emperor is on that list of gods. They also say that the hive mind might be a god, which is a really, really crazy thing. I actually really like that.
Scary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a whole other concept. Oh boy.
Good one, Stephen Lucas. Thank you for bringing that up.
So here's a question. If the Emperor is godlike now, he has inherently always existed according to like how the Chaos Gods function, which also explains how he hops in and out of time periods that he was never a part of.
Maybe. I'm not entirely sold on the has always existed part, because again, that would contradict a lot of lore, like the War in Heaven. And
yeah.
So I don't know. Ricky Chapman, thank you, sir. Ricky Chapman is our local RPG enthusiast, and he runs several campaigns where he will tell us all about the really cool stuff that happens in his campaigns. He says, so it's like in AOS. The soldier believes his sword will hurt the ghost, and the sword will hit and kill the ghost.
Sort of.
Talking about demons, I think.
Yes, there are demons that are just immune to certain attacks. But for the most part, when you are fighting demons, it is very much willpower based, whether or not they can or cannot corrupt you. And the second they get a hold of you, it doesn't matter how much you try to purify yourself, you will never wash that off. Well, I mean, you can if you spend time in a Mortis engine, but good luck trying to survive that.
Rush21129 says, oh God, what if the current 40k setting is just the Emperor's afterbirth?
Not crazy about that. And yet,
I mean, it makes you wonder, though, because, Slaanesh's birth changed the galaxy. We don't know when the Emperor was born.
We have theories on when he was born, but we don't know exactly when. We just know that when he murdered his cousin or whatever, he accidentally created Draconian.
So he's Cain. He's Cain as well. Good grief.
But he created a demon so powerful with one act that it was able to hurt him at his full power.
I think a good way to look at the way that demons respond to willpower and how and why that affects them is to think of the nature of the warp itself, which is a sort of gestalt whole of like all of the conscious processes of every creature that's ever thought, right? That has a soul that connects to the warp at least. They are operating in some meshed together web of consciousnesses, which superimposes on reality in places where that barrier between what is real and what is surreal is weak. Like, this is how Geller fields work. They impose a bubble of real space where the thoughts of the sleeping psyker do not include demons. And as a result, nothing can enter, right? Having the willpower to banish a demon is about making such a strong impression on that network, that gestalt whole, the warp, that they are destabilized.
Mm-hmm.
And can no longer trick existence into accepting they're meant to be there.
I wonder how you'd look at a null or a blank in that.
They just have that field around them.
Yeah, so I would say that nulls and blanks do have souls, but they are not connected to the warp, and their nature is unpleasant. They are isolated. They have this eerie aspect, and because of this, they like destabilize everything. They impose reality around them constantly, which is a bummer for most creatures because, yeah, they're meant to have this. So I'm frozen here.
Also, one really, really funny thing is technically you could banish a Slaaneshi demon by saying "Begone, thought." If you have enough authority in yourself, you could be like, "Be gone, thought," and they just poof out of existence.
Yeah, because the stronger your willpower is, the more you contribute to the warp, and being proximal to a demon matters. And they can't exist separate from like any conscious creature, probably, but it's a little bit like if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around, right?
Well, I want to throw in here. I think the Emperor's relationship with faith is possibly one of the setting's greatest ironies. During the Great Crusade of the 30th millennium, the Emperor championed what was called the Imperial Truth. This was an ideological framework of scientific rationalism and strict atheism. Superstition was considered taboo, and it was all about reason, and it was all about the practical application of the human mind. This is partially why the Ultramarines had their logic-based tactics, was because it was in line with the Imperial Truth and things like that. This Imperial Truth condoned the burning of temples, it outlawed organized religion, it condemned the worship of anything, including the Emperor, as dangerous superstition. And the theory, I mean, we don't know why, but we believe the Emperor wanted to starve the ruinous powers of this, and that his reasoning is that if the warp feeds on belief, then denying it names and stories and worship would starve it. Remove faith, you remove the food source. That's one of the theories as to why that happened. However, trying to engineer transcendence out of humanity, starve the warp by stripping it of these things, humans still dream. They still fear. They still hope. They still grieve. The emotions are still present. The Imperial Truth just gave them no language to process those forces, only efficiency and function. So suppression became pressure. Pressure became resonance. And resonance invited the warp back through, you know, the things that they wanted, that they needed, because humans are fundamentally under this paradigm. They are faith-making creatures. Denying them an outlet does not eliminate the emotion, it just redirects it.
Yep. One other thing, though, is that the Emperor was also just a massive hypocrite.
Like, yes, absolutely.
Like, well, yeah.
150,000%.
I'm banning all religion except to Mars and my best friend, who's possibly a love interest.
Don't forget Alianus Pius.
Yeah. Oh, and Erda.
And
yeah,
Erda.
All of them can have faith. But none of you.
So when the Emperor got wounded during the Siege Terra and his interment in the Golden Throne, that changes everything, because now we don't have the pressure to create the Imperial Truth anymore. In fact, the opposite is true. The rise of Euphrates Keeler has jump-started this idea of the Emperor as a divine being. So the Emperor is immobile. He's dying. He's on his psychic life support system. And that means he can no longer suppress or control the faith of his subjects. The cults that have been quietly growing throughout the Great Crusade, including Euphrates Keelers, they explode in the aftermath of the heresy, because it's such a galaxy-defining moment that it seems to be a spiritual thing. Everybody has to decide, like, what part of that line you belong on. And it's very easy to say, well, if I worship the Emperor, no one can ever claim that I was in favor of Horus. Right?
Also, the fact that a lot of them actually saw miracles happen is another huge part of it. Like,
some did. I wouldn't say many, but some.
Yeah, but I mean, are you going to be one of the ones that wasn't there?
Right. Like, again, this human nature is going to say, well, certainly I witnessed miracles of the Emperor myself, of course. Of course.
Oh, like, oh, you heard it from a friend of a friend. No. I was there. I saw it.
And the worship of the Emperor is not just symbolic. It's there's prayer, there's genuflection, but there is literally sacrifice of people. The death cults. There's the Astronomicon,
the Sisters of Battle.
The Sisters of Battle. So you could argue that all of this faith empowers the Emperor in the Immaterium. It's reflected in the warp and ascends him to godhood. Maybe not right then, but maybe over time, maybe very slowly and subtly, or maybe he always had some spark of the divine, because it's often said that the Emperor stole something from the Chaos Gods. That's a long-standing rumor.
So I don't know if it's necessarily spark of the divine, but I guess in the same way that the Chaos Gods have dominion over certain domains of human experience and expression, I feel like the Emperor's sheer power as a psyker and connection to thoughts throughout the everything and tied to the warp inherently might have allowed him to begin carving out that little slice of real estate in the warp. And like what's stolen is dominion, right? Territory, which has been solidified properly by worship, by faith.
That also ties into the Astronomicon's beacon glowing in the warp itself, which is the realm that we know that Celestine, when she dies, she goes to, and then has to go through her trials, which again is tedious, and then get out of.
I think it's unquestionable that he is or has such a strong presence in the warp that he could be considered on the same playing field as gods. Like it's basically a label at this point, like whether he is or isn't, because he's got all the powers and abilities that you would associate with the god.
When it came to that conversation that Guilliman had with his Eldari advisor, the Eldari advisor said that a lot of the Eldar do believe that the Emperor is a god, but there's also a custodian that said something similar. It's one of the custodians that guards the Emperor. And the custodian said God and godlike is just perspective.
Guilliman gives us a really clear look at this, because Guilliman was he was raised by and in an Imperium that preached atheism. He is intellectually resistant to faith, and yet he cannot deny what his own senses are telling him. In the book Dark Imperium, which I think you may have referenced a few times.
I keep referencing it.
Yeah, he applies the logic that is a main core part of his personality. He applies these logic theoreticals to his father's divinity. And each one ends with the same uncomfortably practical conclusion that the Emperor is a god. So in the logic of Guilliman, the Emperor is a god. Now, Guilliman dismisses this idea. He's angrily dismisses this idea.
Even though it worked for him and protected him and helped him and is constantly shown to him and even told to him by other races.
Yeah, he just can't stop returning to it. And then we have Godblight. This is the final book of the trilogy. And in Godblight, there's this guy, Militant Apostolic Matthew, who's one of the preachers that, I think he's the preacher.
This is the war-trained guy.
Right. And when he dies using faith to destroy Nurgle's cauldron, Guilliman, who sends him on what he thought was a suicide mission, is like, okay, I have beliefs that I have to question. The man who designed the Codex Astartes and rebuilt the Imperium based on logic is like, okay, he's being convinced by evidence that he cannot explain away. So Guilliman's viewpoint is actually really important, because he is the ultimate skeptic. And yet he's being convinced that faith is real, the Emperor is a god. And I don't think you can discount the importance of that perspective.
Also, in that very same book, that preacher dude is barefoot and in a robe and fighting demons better than Guilliman. He has like no weapons. And he's just like, no, stop it. Go away. And the demons are just like exploding around him. And Guilliman's just like, how do I use my sword? Oh, have faith that your father will protect you. Okay. Damn it. That series of books is so good at like showing you a modern interpretation of faith, and I love it because you read Guilliman as if Guilliman is written as if it's the audience, and I love that about it. And the whole book is the whole series is just really, really good.
I see a comment that I can answer. I'm just going to mention it here. Rush21129 asks, when was the Astronomicon built? It was built directly after the Unification Wars. So somewhere around 500 years into the 30th millennium.
Now, the machine that the Astronomicon is connected to,
yeah.
That's a whole nother one where we don't properly know.
It may be a relic of the War in Heaven. We're not entirely certain.
I still have my theories about it actually being the thing that stripped the souls from the Necrons and fed it to the void, the dark gods. And now the Emperor uses it to strip souls from people to extend his ever-dying life.
That'd be a very funny thing to have borrowed.
Right? Could you imagine the Necrons figuring that one out? Oh, you son of a bitch.
So we've quoted novels so far, and we've quoted a lot of events happening in novels. But as you know, novels are not, as you know, if you've watched this channel a lot, novels are not generally considered primary canon. They are essentially tertiary canon. Whereas the rule books and the codexes are primary canon. Like, we know that what's in the most current rule book and what's in the most current codex, that is real for 40K. And I would like to quote from the Sisters of Battle Codex. The intense, unquestioning nature of faith is a potent weapon indeed, manifesting as divine inspiration that drives the sororitas to unprecedented feats of martial prowess. Sisters of Battle, gripped with holy fervor, banish worldly fears from their minds, shrug off mortal wounds, and summon preternatural strength to smite their foes. So that is directly out of a codex saying faith is a thing, and it does have these abilities. But I want to point out that I think one that's crucial here is they talk about it being unquestioning faith. And possibly the reason why the Sisters of Battle manifest it more commonly than others is because the sisters typically do not doubt. Doubt is a crack through which chaos can enter, I guess. I don't know. But if you look at it from that viewpoint, that maybe the sisters' sheer strictness of zeal, which is, obviously they have their penitents and their mistress repentia and their dogmatas to enforce all of this, right? But it's possible that the strictness of zeal that the sisters have creates a more pure connection between them and the Emperor, and thus more commonly able to project the miracle.
Blessed is the mind too small for doubt.
I don't know. What do you think?
I could second that, because in Mark of Faith, the book Mark of Faith, it's all about a sister questioning her faith, even though she's like chosen by the Emperor with this burnt aquila across her face.
So I think part of it is that whatever the Emperor is now, the Emperor has opinions and beliefs. The Emperor has his own modus operandi, and that is not what the ecclesiarchy is doing. The sisters are not preaching in the same way that an ecclesiarch is. They are taking the fight to the enemies of the Imperium, those that in life the Emperor wanted to persecute and prosecute. And in so doing, they are actually carrying out the will of the Emperor consistently and tend not to dwell on things that the Emperor tried to avoid. In so doing, they bring themselves closer to the actual ideal of the man in life.
So judge them by their acts rather than their beliefs.
I think it's both. Because they're independently faithful in the Emperor. They are constantly sending out these psychic beacons. They are keeping the Emperor in their thoughts always. And as they do, they are carrying out, for the most part, the kind of work that he himself might have.
It's the most pure soldiers the Emperor could have ever asked for. A more elite version of Astartes. One that'll never question their loyalty.
I feel like there's a little bias on your part, Alexis, of just saying.
Oh, well, no. There are sisters that have fallen to chaos. But also, sisters have a victory where the Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, did not.
Well, the most faithful, I guess you might say, or the most miraculous, probably a better way to put it, the most miraculous examples of both faith and the Sisters of Battle are the living saints.
Mm-hmm.
And what is a living saint? A living saint is essentially an apex of faith as power in the 41st millennium. These are individuals, almost exclusively ecclesiarchy warriors, predominantly adepta sororitas, whose devotion to the emperor has become so total and so all-consuming that they unconsciously draw upon the emperor to fuel supernatural abilities that are almost constant. They are technically doing something similar to what maybe, if you go by some of the theories we've espoused so far, they may be drawing like an energy from the warp, like a psyker, but the mechanism differs because the living saint's power flows through their connection to the emperor as a god, filtered through faith rather than raw psychic ability, if you will. But they're not psychers. Like living saints are typically not psychers. The one, of course, we have the exception to every rule in the galaxy is Ephriel Stern.
Well, again, she's now not a psyker.
But the defining characteristic of living saints is that they can resurrect. Saint Sabbat returned from the dead. Saint Celestine has returned from the dead.
Constantly.
Euphrates Keeler has returned from the dead. So, I mean, that's you got to admit that's a hell of a convincing argument.
There's also Saint Ananias who couldn't be destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
But that's Dawn of War, and technically she's in the novel, but don't read those novels. They're really bad.
Yeah, and we're talking about these are very distinct and unique individuals. Saint Celestine is the most visible one, but there's also Saint Sabbat. We talked about her. Saint Ananias. You could argue that Matthew might have been one. And of course, our very own Saint Drusus of the Calixtus sector, who is considered a saint, although not a living saint, although he was technically resurrected, and then that's how he defeated the Evoth. Whether that's true or not, it's Dark Heresy is weird. We'll just leave it at that.
Lord Sola Macarius was declared a saint after his death.
Yeah, but that's the difference between
different.
Difference between saint and living saint.
Living saint, yeah, they're two distinct titles.
Right.
Although I do want to point out that if we are going to go with the living saint equivalent and chaos god equivalent, the equivalent of a living saint would be a demon prince, something similar to power where they have to have belief in order to transform and everything. But the emperor doesn't have spawn. You're either a living saint or you're dead. No in between. Where chaos has, do you believe enough in your own power and the power that you're being granted to become a demon prince? Or are you a chaos spawn? Because demon princes, strictly in 40k, I don't know if this is true for Age of Sigmar or fantasy, but strictly in 40k, demon princes are mortals. They always have been. And they are granted powers by the warp to become demon-like. In fact, greater demons look down on them. This is why Be'lakor hates named greater demons.
Vera, what do you think about living saints?
I think this tracks back to the discussion at the very start of the stream about how the Emperor is associated with death. It is noteworthy that unlike the Chaos Gods, the Emperor has a concept of death, because the Emperor is not Neverborn. As a matter of fact, the Emperor has had biological children who themselves resist the concept of death. Okay, sure, we can, okay, yeah, but it's still. The Emperor had life.
He had life in a way that the Chaos Gods definitely didn't.
Yes, and I think that tracks to this. I think that transformation of taking on more of the essence of the Emperor, which is like sort of what Demon Prince does. They take in so much of the essence of that divinity, they become a true shard of the Chaos God, right? They lose their individuality. They become a daemon in truth. right? I think that manifesting different is natural. It would have to be that way because they can't really be subsumed in the same way, because the Emperor has a presence that is not that side of the warp. Like, in some ways, the Chaos Gods are the territory in the warp that they occupy. They are this mass, this gestalt concept, this distributed thing that has its own ego in its own domain, but they are also manifested through their demons. The Emperor's alive, kind of. He's a guy.
Yeah, his according to all lore, his body is not fully dead. He is still alive, or that's propaganda, and he died a long time ago, and they've just been, kind of lying about it, which would make a lot of sense for 40K.
He seems alive enough.
Mm-hmm.
If we can work with that and assume.
He's alive in our hearts.
The real Emperor is the friends we made along the way.
That's one thought that I have. The other one is that the Chaos Spawn is the ultimate expression of chaos. It is randomized. It is muling and crazed. It is turned in on itself with anatomy that makes no sense. It is inconsistent. It's writhing. It is a shapeless lump. It is sacred in this way. They are often held as sacred by cults because they are embodiments of the idea. Like, here is the physical form of chaos. The Emperor is a god of the warp, perhaps, but not quite a chaos god. In fact, he's defined by order, defined by orthodoxy. I think that it would be strange for there to be a consequence for reaching for those heights and not meeting them, and that would cause you to devolve in that kind of way.
So, since we are speaking of the Emperor, I thought I'd bring up a couple of pictures of him.
We are gonna do a whole episode on the Emperor. Just anybody who's curious. Yeah. Oh wow, there's the old school picture right there.
I love this picture. There are actually two different pictures here.
I love that one because it's very Geiger-esque to me. It's very
very Geiger, yeah.
Yeah.
You can also see that the mechanism he's in is the exact same. Like, it's the same type of mechanism. Like, it goes up to his waist, and you can see the holes in him from the Claw of Horus, which I absolutely love. This little detail where you can see that he was torn in half, and this is all that's left of him. Also, do you notice that there's no bionics on him?
I mean, the whole throne is potentially a bionic. I mean, yeah,
technically, yes, but there's no bionic eye.
So, well, I would be surprised if he had like bionic eyes and things like that, and he didn't have a cybernetic arm or a leg.
Yeah.
Whose job do you think it is to change out the little IV drip?
Probably a custodes.
What do they do with the used bottles? Are those sacred?
Probably. I don't know.
So, okay, as dumb as it is, yes, that is. There used to be a grenade in 2nd edition that had a tiny drop of his blood. And it was definitely a Monty Python reference. It was the Holy Hand Grenade of Antioch.
Good.
This actually leads me into another thing. The Legion of the Damned.
Yes.
The Legion of the Damned, these are the most supernatural Space Marines of them all. They are the most ghost-like or demon-like, depending on who you ask, Space Marines. The short version is that these guys are flame-wreathed Space Marines who show up inexplicably from time to time to assist other groups of the Imperium in battle against the Imperium's enemies. They have made an appearance very recently, post the Great Rift, and there are theories that they may be or may have been Ferrus Manus and the Iron Hands from the drop site massacre on Istvan 5 that are somehow sustained through the warp. But there's also theories that they're just a chapter called the Firehawks who got lost in the warp and somehow became combined with it. Nobody really knows the truth. But what we do know is that they are they are deeply supernatural. They are tied to expressions of faith and things like that. And this does appear to have a real world inspiration, not unlike what you guys were just talking about. There's a story called The Bowman, and it's where a British soldier's prayer to St. George during the First World War summons a ghostly unit of archers from Agincourt to protect his company. And it's very likely that that is the origin of the story. They have been compared to demons by Eldar. Eldar are like, this is clearly a demon.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, of course, the Imperium is, we're like, oh, we don't have a clue. And there are some chaos sorcerers who like, that is clearly not a demon. So
I think we should take the words of Bellicor, which is, oh God, I'm being shot. Sorry, I had to make the joke because Bellicor doesn't comment on them, which would answer a lot of questions. If Bellicor was just like, fellow demons have arrived, it would answer that question. But instead, Bellicor does not mention them at all and just gets shot and died.
Now, this is not an episode about the Legion of the Damned. We could do a whole episode on the Legion of the Damned. So the short version is these guys act a lot like demons in that they show up and they leave without any real explanation of how they do it. And they have a semi-real or at least semi-warp connected aspect of their physiology that is not unlike demons. And that's the reason I bring them up.
So, I can say two things about the Legion of the Damned that we know are true. The Legion of the Damned only show up when they're absolutely needed and where they're needed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
They disappear after a fight.
Mm-hmm.
They do not stay around. There is a psychic resonance that Tigerius mentions when he notices their presence. When in the Gathering Storm, they talk. So they are capable of talking. We never know what they actually say, but they do manage to get the phalanx across to the Cadian sector in under a week, which is insanely fast warp travel, which means that they had something. Well, we don't know if they had a reason to do that or anything to do with it, or the writers just wanted them to be there. But this shares similarities to feats that Celestine has done. When Celestine exits the warp, she comes out in the places that she is most needed and arrives at the nick of time to save the day. Similarly to the Legion of the Damned, Celestine dies at the end of her fights and disappears. Well, her body actually remains, and sometimes they make trophies out of it and carry it around. It's very weird, especially when she commented on it in a terrible book.
You seem to really like that book. I'm just saying.
It's one of the books when I read it, I didn't like it, and now reflecting on it makes me like it more each time I talk about it. So I want to go back, reread it so I don't like it again. But the Legion of the Damned disappears at the end of the fight. Do they do it in a similar manner to how Celestine does it, where they just die? Because we don't see their battle. Their battle is never described. It's described as a slaughter. But it could be to both sides. They could actually be suits of armor of the dead warriors that have died in previous campaigns and everything, and are now just dead on the ground or disappear because they're not psychically connected to reality anymore. They go back to the Emperor's domain. Which, by the way, I've been thinking of domain expanse ever since you mentioned domain, Vera. Just the entire time I have been giggling about that.
Domain expansion Space Marines?
Yes. So they do have similar feats to Living Saints. The Legion of the Damned could be the equivalent of Living Saints for Space Marines, where no matter who you were or who you are, if you died and have ties to the Emperor or believed in him strongly enough that you might become one of his legionnaires. This might have been the fate of the faithful during the heresy, or even the Firehawks. They might have been a fully religious chapter for all we know.
Or we do know that the Primarchs they have warp stuff inside of them. Like a Primarch is not just science. it is also the energies and powers of the warp. So it could be Ferrus Manus's reflection or echo or shard of being that remained after his death that is doing this as well.
And if we know one thing about 40K, they shard all over the place.
There is a lot of beings who get sharded. The Satan get sharded. Magnus got sharded. It's a thing that happens.
Now, the space travel thing is something that I want to talk about a little bit. Oh my God, was it? I think it's just Celestine, the book. Celestine flies in front of her spaceship. I know this sounds weird, but she does. She exits the spaceship and flies in front of it to part a warp storm that is encompassing the ship itself, which also means she flies thousands of times faster than light. But we're not going to talk about that part and why she doesn't just immediately do that in every single fight and win. Speed blitzing enemies is something that they really should do. But she flies in front of her ship, and the ship actually gets from point A to point B extremely quickly. This is also when Greyfax is still questioning whether or not she is a heretical being or a demon or whatever. And yeah. The Legion of the Damned, when they were on the Phalanx was able to travel from Terra to Cadia in under a week, which is faster than it's ever traveled. This is a similar feat to what Celestine did. So it stands to reason that they have similar powers. Now, this is grasping at things that are barely written and reading in between lines like this, trying to see if there's something there. I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, and like in each case, these are for the transit stuff. It's like mastery over the warp, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it could.
You know who else can move pretty much instantly? Demons.
That's true.
Yeah. Well, demons need a connection to certain points to go from point A to point B. But once they have that connection, they can just appear anywhere.
Yeah, and I would argue that like faith in the Emperor is a connection because they show up where they're needed, right? The Legion of the Damned. They could be using the faith as a conduit because although it's kind of hard to put a prescribed summoning room somewhere for a daemon, the Aquila is everywhere.
Yeah. That could be their summoning rune. Prayers could be the summoning ritual. Sacrifice. Skulls sacrifice. Could be the thing that bring them in.
So, I mean, you could look at it, if you look at it through the viewpoint of the Emperor was trying to starve the Chaos Gods with the Imperial Truth, then through that same lens, what empowers the Chaos powers is worship, is belief that generates warp energy that's directed towards specific entities, which is not out of line with how the Rios powers are depicted or anything of that nature. They don't seem to be going out there like saying, "Hey, please worship me" or anything like that. But they certainly aren't. They certainly are getting out there saying, "Don't worship me." Right? They don't have They seem to tolerate cults just fine, worshiping them. So maybe that is the thing. But then we get to something like the orcs. And the orcs have this fascinating parallel because their phenomena, the Great Green, it seems to transcend their ideology and their species. It's a Gestalt psychic field, or sometimes, at least.
Gestalt a lot this episode.
Sometimes described as a Gestalt psychic field. Powered by the instinctual conviction of the orcs that alters physical reality in the warp's reflection of the material world, if you look at it through that same paradigm. So that orc weird boys are the release valves for this collective psychic pressure, channeling the Wog energy in ways analogous to how sororitas generate miracles. Maybe, possibly. The key difference here is we know that the orcs are bioengineered. Well, we know, that's a strong word. The key difference is that we are told through ancient rumors and things that may or may not be true, but we're told that the orcs were engineered as bioweapons by the old ones in the form of the Krorks. And that means they have a higher baseline of psychic potential, and they can generate more raw warp energy per individual than humans, kind of like Eldar, who were also engineered by the Old Ones. But the mechanism would be the same. The collective belief shapes the warp shapes reality. And that does seem to be that's kind of something that's consistent in 40K. That belief is power, regardless of who's believing it.
Yeah, for the most part.
And that brings us to the Tau and the Tauva, the emergence of the Tauva, which is basically that same thing. Belief is power. And the Tau are famously, specifically the Ethereals and the Fire Warriors and the Air Caste and the Earth Caste, those guys, they are famously weak in the warp. Their presence doesn't register there. Their souls barely register at all in the Immaterium, and they have no psychic traditions. And yet, through the collective belief of their allies, their auxiliaries, their clients, their colonies, all these other species that do have souls that resonate in the warp, the greater goods philosophy has spawned a new warp entity, the Tauva, the greater good, which is a philosophical and utilitarian principle. And it's on the process. It's on the way to becoming a god through the faith of billions. And that, if you look at that template, that may exactly be what happened to the Emperor. Just it happened a long time ago and probably without anybody even noticing.
Yeah. Also, in the Tau, more spiritual stuff is happening. Like, as much as they don't want it to happen, Commander Farsight was fighting an Imperial vessel, and his commander, his former commander, who was an AI programmed battlesuit, because the commander died, says something that is not in its programming in any way, shape, or form, and sacrifices itself, saying something like, I can't remember the exact quote, but I'm just like, hey, Farsight, you did pretty good. I'm going to go kill myself now. And he didn't say exactly that, obviously, but he sacrificed himself and destroyed an Imperial vessel by flying down a Nova Cannon, which 1000% would destroy an Imperial vessel and probably a couple of planets near it, because GW wrote Battlefleet Gothic is fucking crazy. I love Battlefleet Gothic's weaponry, and
Same.
yeah, it is amazing. But when Farsight got back, he started talking to the human auxiliaries, because Farsight actually wants to know about the spirituality of humans, because his entire life he was like, no, that doesn't work. Stop believing that. You need to stop doing that. That's bad. That doesn't work. I'm praying to the machine spirit, so it works. That's not how it works. It worked. Dumb luck. Then he gets this whole thing about the machine spirit, and it resonates with him because he can't explain his sword. He can't explain actions that his commander are taking that go against programming. And he's like, okay, tell me what the machine spirit is. And there are other books. There's a Death Watch book that's a short story that's incredibly good, where an Earthcast starts. They go into a. Okay, let me try not jumping around and actually set up the story real quick, because I'm just going to jump to the end and be like, oh, wait, let me work myself backwards. But again, this has to do with faith. And I want to preface this. This is faith-based. But a Tau team, including some human auxiliaries, a Fire Warrior commander, and a couple of Earthcast, are going through this human fortress that they found that is covered in black with the inquisitorial eye on it. And they're like, this is an inquisitor symbol, but we're not sure which one. It's a watch fortress. It's a watch fortress. It's Death Watch.
So
they try to get into it, and they eventually break in, and inside they find dead Space Marines. And they're like, well, this doesn't make sense. Space Marines don't leave their dead behind. They collect all of them. That's a huge thing for them. Why are their shoulder pads different colors? Hang on, I studied that one. That one's a White Scar. This one is an Ultramarine. why are there so many different chapters here? Why are their armors black? Because they don't know what the Death Watch is. They're Tau. They simply haven't engaged them at this point. And so they go through this whole thing. There's plant monsters is the big twist, and plant monsters start attacking everyone. They're zombies. And the Tau are fighting, and the human auxiliaries are fighting, but the Earthcast sees a dead tech marine in the corner. And she falls to her knees and offers it one of her comrades, her dead comrades, a plasma weapon. And the tech marine's bionics come back on and feed off of the plasma and resurrect the suit. The space marine is just skeletal at this point. The space marine is dead. It's just the suit working at this point. And it's heavily implied that the space marine is probably still like alive, but catatonic inside it. So it's just acting on pure instinct and can't talk anymore. And she keeps walking around feeding this thing plasma weaponry to start the space marine and keep it alive and everything. And she comments on the fact that this is what her people are missing. We are worshiping this thing as if it's a god. I understand why the humans do this now. And then she realizes she's infected and she walks around with the space marine killing everything. They eventually die. But it's a really good story about faith and how she's like understanding faith for the first time in the setting by offering energy to something she considers divine at the time because it's a protector. That's a cool story because it's faith from a different perspective. So we got faith from the Tau, faith from the Orcs, faith from the Votan who believe in their god machines. Well, they're not god machines, they're AI super computer machines.
Yeah, the Mechanicus is faith. The cult Mechanicus is fascinating, and you could look at the mysteries around whether machine spirits are real or not as part of that. Belief gives them power. Maybe if they believe strongly enough, there is a machine spirit that does act on its own without being an AI, for example.
I'm interested in the idea that faith is almost contagious for the Tau also, because as they've incorporated more Guavasa, as they've begun to analyze the structures of human society, they have, incorporated more, let's say, strongly connected to the soul, to the warp individuals into the Empire. They've begun to explore these ideas. It sort of mirrors the Emperor's own fears about what might happen if faith is allowed to remain present in the Imperium. It turns out it is catching. It can be compelling.
We have a quick super chat from Hieronymus. He says, what if the legions of the damned are the two lost legion remnants? Can't rule that out because we don't know anything about the two lost legions. However, given the fact that the Legion of the Damned only showed up fairly recently, like in the last several thousand years, as opposed to pre-heresy era, it seems unlikely, but it's not impossible. And I saw one that I wanted to answer really quick because there was a super chat I thought that had a pretty interesting question. Rush 2112 and I asks, did the Emperor calm the warp while crusading? The warp did calm. The warp did calm right before the Great Crusade launched, because warp storms were present throughout most of the galaxy up to that point. However, most sources say that the reason the warp storms calmed was due to the birth of Slaanesh, which ended the Eldar Empire. So it doesn't appear to be the Emperor, but I'm not going to rule it out.
Still counts as a tactical oopsie daisy.
And then, okay, now we come to like one of the most fascinating and most recent impacts on how faith works in Warhammer 40,000. That is the Pariah Nexus. Alexis, tell us, what is the Pariah Nexus?
Confusing. So it is a story that teleports Ethereal Stern around the galaxy because at the time she's on the other side of the galaxy fighting alongside your brain, and then suddenly is at the Pariah Nexus. And there's no story in between that. She fought Shalaxi Hellbane, And then I guess just was like, I guess I'm needed at the Pariah Nexus now, and just went there. So the Pariah Nexus is a Necron. Okay, how to explain this? There is a tomb world that is trying to activate a certain machine. Luminor Zaris is trying to figure out psychic powers and how to best control them. He knows that he has the Blackstone, but he's noticed that something new is happening with the Sisters of Battle. There's a whole campaign around it. Space Marines are involved, but they're the boring parts. I'm sorry. I'm taking shots at Space Marines today. I apologize so
Why do you
much.
got to be so mean to my boys?
Okay, they made male Sisters of Battle, and they're just boring, and that's the Black
You
Templar.
mean male Sisters of Battle?
Wow. The Black Templars are closely tied, by the way, to the Lectitio Divinatus and all of that nonsense from back in the Horus Heresy. So,
But I count 0 living saints among them.
there's 0 living saints. That's true.
Yeah, but Illumina Zaris is trying to figure out a whole bunch of things, including soul, prayer, how the Space Marines work, how certain things manifest, and trying to awaken ancient technologies. Typical Necron mumbo jumbo. Space Marines start battling. The Sisters of Battle get involved. Eventually, Luminor Zaris has to face off against Ethereal Stern, but they're not really facing off. I don't think they ever actually fight. Draxus is there. She's bald. That's important. This is her one and only story where she appears, and that's it. She never has a story after this, which is super weird for some reason. I think she might be in an Inferno comic or, passage, short story. But Draxus makes a deal with Belisarius Call to get a shard of the Void Dragon, and then she uses the shard of the Void Dragon against Luminor Zaris, which then destroys all of the stuff that he's working on. But in the meantime, Ethereal Stern comes in Super Saiyan mode, destroying everything. Luminor Zaris is like, haha, clicks his evil switch and shuts off all the psychic powers. Ethereal Stern gets depowered for a moment, looks around and just goes, oh, okay, Super Saiyan 3. Got it. And flies again, killing everything in her path. Eventually, the Void Dragon gets too dangerous, and then the story just abruptly ends.
The Pariah Nexus is essentially a region of space where the Necrons have deployed their ancient pylons, the ancient pylon network, and these suppress the warp. And in the Pariah Nexus, they suppress the warp almost entirely. Psychers can't use their powers, warp drives fail, technologies that have a warp link cease to function, things like that. It's essentially an anti-warp environment in that area. However, in this storyline, the Adeptus Sororitas maintained their faith-based abilities and continued to perform miracles, including Ephrael Stern. So this directly challenges the understanding that faith and psychic powers are the same thing, which leaves basically only 2 explanations that I think we can discuss. One is that faith is distinctly different from psychic powers, which is the route that I think we're leaning towards. And the other one is that the faith is just so strong that it overpowers any attempt to shut it down. And that it is psychic, it's just so psychic that it comes all the way back around to not being psychic.
So,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead, Veer.
Like, my question is, could the Emperor connect to the warp within the Nexus?
So we know that the Emperor kept at minimum 10,000 Sisters of Silence around him because every one custodian had a Sister of Silence with them. And he was able to do magic.
He was able to power the Astronomicon from as far away as Eleanor.
Yep. And literally walk around with Sisters of Silence, who the only reason that they have to keep silent is because they can see his true form, which might be an old man. Or that dead thing that is horrific looking. I really like the idea that the Emperor is just a rotting corpse. I just really, really like that idea because the golden imagery and everything, this heroic figure and everything is just what he portrays to everyone. And he's actually just this old man that's rotting away is such a cool thing that even his bodyguards have to keep secret at all times is amazing. But yeah. I do have a third theory about the Pariah Nexus that kind of weaves its way into the story. The Void Dragon could have just manipulated the technology to allow the sisters to use faith.
So the book. Go ahead.
At all times, the Void Dragon was with Draxus.
So you're suggesting it could be possible that there's like a filter placed on it? There's like some variety of psychic energy to be allowed through?
It could be. But
Okay.
there is nothing in the story hinting at this. But when you have a god of machinery in your back pocket and a Pokeball, you know, I'm sorry, it's not a Pokeball. It's a interdimensional tiny capsule that keeps creatures inside it. Legally distinct, Nintendo.
Well, there are those Nintendo patents. There really are only the 4 possibilities, though. Like, is it 4, 3? One is that the Emperor is just that strong and can penetrate the field. 2 is that faith is entirely different. 3 is there's an exception. I guess that's about it, right?
I mean, I guess there could be a fourth. The fourth example is, because 40K is weird, and there's a lot of stuff that just is unexplainable. So maybe the fourth is it's simply unexplainable and will never be explained.
Yeah, it's just something that happens because
a wizard did it.
Sure.
It is worth noting, in the book Dark Imperium, there is a Custodes Tribune called Kolquan.
Oh, he says, that's the one that I keep quoting.
He says, "We're not here to judge the galaxy for its hypocrisy. We're here to save it, and faith may yet prove to be our greatest weapon." That's a custodian saying that.
They are very, very, very red on the galaxy. Like, they are the most... Like, a custodian is a step below a Primarch in terms of intelligence.
True. Also, we have done an episode on the Adeptus Custodes, and they may not have free will at all. Go check out that episode if you want to learn more about that theory.
Poor custodians.
They may not have any free will.
But they're pretty well informed.
They're well informed. They know a lot of secrets that most people in the setting do not know. So I tend to put some weight on custodian words over almost anybody else.
Yeah.
Just saying. So what do you think? So what do you think is the most likely answer here, Vera? Which option would you buy into as far as faith and how it works, even when anti-psychic stuff doesn't would stop psychic stuff?
I buy into the Emperor as exceptional. I think that is the most in line with 40K's themes. I think that that is literally a rewarding of faith in the Emperor. I think that is the keystone here. That makes the most sense to me. The idea that the Emperor is an entity that does reward faith, and that trumps even the Necron technology.
So faith is not psychic power. It is something distinctly different.
I didn't say that. I didn't say
that. Okay. All right. Like I warned you guys at the very beginning of this episode, that faith is a very strange thing. And now you're seeing it where we're like, I mean, it might be this, it might be that. It does things weird. We're not sure.
I feel like when you reach the deity level of power over unreality, you start to find exceptions to things. I don't believe there exists a technology so powerful that the direct hand of Tzeentch could not interfere with it.
Okay.
I think I apply that to the Emperor also. I think that makes the most sense, because I don't think there's like a secret new principle in reality that you can manipulate to create miracles. I think that is the least satisfying answer, is that it just works because it can.
When it comes to like technological miracles, the Sisters of Battle are a bit weird because their armor and everything comes from Mars. Mars has its own cults and its own faith and everything, which is separate from the Imperium. So we know that it's not a technological thing that's making the miracles happen, because then the AdMech would be doing it constantly, but they're not.
You could argue that the way machine spirits function is exactly that, though.
That is fair.
Yeah, I guess like the rights of the Mechanicus sort of do tie into this, because they have something to do with proper maintenance, right? They have something to do with operations, but machine spirits are very real.
Well, I'm gonna go a little bit step further and say, if we look at the Emperor, what he was doing, or what we believe the Emperor's great plan to be, that may give us some insights into how he saw humanity's relationship with the warp and how that works, because it seems like the Emperor was trying to sever humanity from the warp. The Webway project ostensibly was to give humanity a way to travel through the stars without having to use the warp in the first place. And the Emperor was very not okay with psychic powers. He didn't think that was a good idea. He was like, let's corral them, let's use them when we have to. But when it came down to it at the Council of Nicaea, the Emperor was like, no, we're not going to use it. Psychic powers are bad. Just don't do it, right? Which is where we get, of course.
That's a bad McCoy.
That's where we get Magnus's big mistake, of course, is right after that. But that's if you look at all these events and say they are all intentionally part of a plan, then it looks like the Emperor was trying to keep humanity in the warp on separate sides of the fence, and he didn't want those two sides to interact. If you go back to that paradigm we talked about where belief is power and all that kind of stuff, that would track with that desire to wall off humanity from the warp and to isolate us.
Well, yeah, because when humanity is in touch with the warp, the best option is that their belief shapes that region of the warp that the Emperor himself is connected to, which is bad for him.
I mean, maybe.
But that's the construction I'm putting forward here, is that like he is sufficiently impactful as to have his own domain, and that he doesn't want that. It's like a problem. It's dangerous.
Okay, so you're saying what has occurred since then is against his wishes, and it is in his opposition to his stated ideology.
Yeah, I think that both contact with the warp and worship of religiosity, of him in particular, both are a problem, and they are an issue for similar reasons.
This goes back to you saying that he didn't want to become a god, but is probably becoming a god anyway.
Yes.
Because your argument is that the Emperor is aware that he is a warp entity and thus is vulnerable to being shaped by mass belief.
I think he would have to be.
Kind of like that Clifford the Big Red Dog question we had about Khorne, where we were saying, like, it's so primal to our nature to kill that maybe it would be difficult to think of Khorne as a puppy as opposed to a god of murder or god of death or war. He's actually like a lot of different things all at once, but essentially, we'll call it slaughter for lack of a better word. Khorne is a god of slaughter because that's a primal part of human psyche. But if you were to organize a group, your local Khorne prayer group, and sat down and said, we're going to think of him as this big, adorable red puppy. And if you did that with enough people over a long enough time, you could affect Khorne in the way that the religion of the Imperium has affected the Emperor. Is that what you're saying?
Kind of. Also in that by insisting that the Emperor is not a god, even reverence of him would have less of an effect, because that belief wouldn't be targeted in the same way.
Okay.
Because I think intent matters. I think that if you are a slaughterer, if you are a violent creature, if you are wrathful in nature and pursue war and domination, then you are radiating an energy that empowers Khorne. If you do it in the name of Khorne, it is laser focused.
Okay. So the Imperial Truth was effective in that it was making the expressions of emotion less impactful.
Yeah, I think that the Emperor wanted to protect himself and his people from sort of what's happening now.
I find that difficult to argue against, and I do think that is in line with his actions and his plans.
I can second this with Vera. In the Celestine book, when she goes to her realm, when she goes to the Emperor's domain, the thousands upon millions of trillions of skulls in that domain are the loyal faithful of the Emperor. It isn't the best fate, but it beats being devoured by demons.
Yeah, the Eldar would like to have a word about how much better it is.
The Eldar died. Can we come in, please?
Well, I mean, if you believe everything is said about Inari and the Iniad and in the Inari, then that is exactly what Iniad is doing, is trying to establish a place for Eldar souls to gather in the afterlife.
It turns out that you go into the realm of the Emperor, Iniad is there. Hi.
He's got like a little vestibule at the entrance.
He's got a little cabin by the river. Hey guys.
I mean, it's worth noting too that I don't think we'll ever get an actual answer to this.
No, certainly not.
And I think that's a good thing. Hear me out. I'm going to use Alexis's catchphrase because she used mine. Hear me out. The way that faith works is one of the most impactful and meaningful mysteries in the setting. Okay. It reflects genuine tension for the creative process, because if you leave things undefined, it's actually really helpful to telling stories and building characters and creating events and raising stakes, things that are all really important for the story of the setting. And I would argue that if you look at how Star Wars treated the Force, when it was a mystery, it was amazing. But
when
once
Star Wars was a mystery, it was amazing.
When it was midichlorians in your blood, it was far less interesting and far less spiritual and far less important, and felt, frankly, far less interesting, right? So if Games Workshop never defines faith, I'm kind of okay with that. I'm kind of fine with that being a mystery that will never fully be solved, because of the example of how the Force worked in Star Wars and how we look at it now.
I will give you that, so long as we can keep machine spirits as also a huge mystery.
Yeah, I think it works better. I would say even more. Machine spirits are more fun when they're ambiguous.
I love the idea that machine spirits might be AI, but I also love the idea of that Freeblade book where the knight just reached into the warp and pulled the soul of the previous pilot and pulled it into its machine spirit. I really like that as well. There's also an old book that I can't remember the name of it, but it describes a Titan fighting, and when the pilots and everything die, the Titan, slumps, and then it gets shot at again, and it just reactivates and opens up and has entirely new weapon systems that the pilots didn't know about, and just starts firing and killing everything. Or when land raiders get damaged, they get angry and turn and fire before the occupant even knows what's happening. I love that kind of stuff. I don't want that to be defined. I want that mystery there because I like it. But I also want campaigns to have definitive endings. Let me know how the fucking 500 Worlds ends.
Yeah, I think it's important to have that kind of wiggle room in the narrative, to have some questions unanswered. But I do think that this direction we're sliding towards, we're honing in on, is coherent. I think it's in line with a lot of things that have happened in the narrative. So,
no, I think that's what our goal was to come up with something coherent. And I'm glad you're here to help us achieve that.
Aw, shucks.
I will also say one other thing about this is that conceptually, the idea of a man who wanted to eliminate religion becoming a god, the idea of a man who the greatest weapon against chaos is the same force that makes chaos possible in the first place, that is the kind of grand joke that is absolutely at the heart of Warhammer 40,000 as a setting. There is so much of Warhammer 40,000 that is essentially jokes, in-jokes, references, commentary, satire. And I feel it is entirely natural for that to be a core aspect of the setting. So that's why I wanted to bring it forward. Is like, we're talking about something that's a pillar of 40K. Faith is a pillar. And that's why it's so fun to talk about like what it actually is as a coherent idea.
I mean, even Malkador said that the Emperor could never get rid of faith. It would always be there.
You know, insofar as that relates to the idea that all of the dominions of the chaos gods are things that are essential to the soul, things that are kind of natural consequences of society, that idea that faith, that this desire for meaning, for purpose, is an inalienable thing, could play into the Emperor's emergence as this god of the warp.
Or a god of order, or a god, the god that, whatever he represents as a god, if he is a god. And I think for the purposes of this discussion, I think we've all landed on the side of he is a god.
Yeah.
I do believe he is a god. But I counter this by saying I believe he was always a god. He was just pretending to be human.
That would not be out of line with the Emperor. And his deeds, the things he accomplished, are certainly like things you would equivalent with a godlike being or a person on their way to becoming a god.
Also, I do have a big question though, like the Emperor wanting to use the webway and the webway project and everything, and then finding out that the Emperor could use the forest.
Well, like, the lion. Yeah, the lion. Yeah, so that is... I mean, the webway project, we don't know that is what the goal was to create, a place for people for humanity to travel through the stars without having to use the warp. But it lines up with that goal. Mm-hmm. And it lines up with a lot of the things the Emperor wanted to do. But it raises as many questions as it answers, because like, how did he know about the webway? How did he know there was one on Earth? Why is there one on Earth? Et cetera, et cetera.
Why is there also one on the moon?
Yeah, if there's one, yeah, it's very strange. And as we know, even the Eldar don't fully understand the webway. They inherited it from the old ones.
I do think I might push back a little bit on the idea that the Emperor has always been a god. I think that a requirement to become one is building out that space in the warp through having your core, being connected to that core concept, and then also through really building oneself up, like amassing power in someone. Like Slaaneish's birth was a cataclysm, like all of these Eldari souls needed to be consumed for it. I think that was a gradual path. I guess what I'm questioning is the distinction between like the most powerful psyker possible and divinity.
My big thing though is I'm still under the pretense of once a god, always has been a god. The two different timelines of 40K and all of the realm of chaos.
This is where I'm going to diverge from Alexis. I don't.
Yeah.
I think the always has existed thing is an interesting myth, but it screws around with the timelines too much, because then you have to talk about like, well, how is Slaanesh before Slaanesh?
But it explains Gaththorpe's writing.
But that's just like one book. I think if the Emperor is divine. Okay, we all seem to agree that that's true. Mm-hmm. And if the Emperor can enact miracles through his faith and the belief is power, these are all things that we seem to kind of all agree on, then I think you do have to say that the living saints are a form of a demon.
Okay. So the reason that I don't like the idea that the living saints are a demon is because the living saints are physical versus demons, which are inherently not physical and need to be tethered.
Okay, so I feel like we have all come to this consensus that faith works differently than psychic powers. Okay,
I would say they're on the same level. Like they
Right.
are inherently the same thing, but just different.
I'm not, and to be clear, I'm not saying they're directly the same thing. I'm saying they're analogous. They're parallel.
Yeah, like a similar principle, but one is vectored through the Emperor in a way that just doesn't happen elsewhere.
Yeah,
And
I can agree to that.
And vectoring through the Emperor, I mean, if you think about it, if faith is a representation of belief in the Emperor, and just like the ways that the Chaos Gods operate, then the Emperor's filter seems to leave out the stuff that happens to Chaos worshippers. There's no Chaos spawn for the Imperium. There's no mutation for worshiping the Emperor.
What if the Chaos spawn are just the custodians?
I mean, now we're talking about some very off the wall ideas. But
well, if you're gonna argue the custodians don't have free will, then
they might not.
Suddenly it aligns pretty well, right?
I mean, this goes back to in that same paradigm. If this is the frame we're constructing, then I think the Legion of the Damned are Neverborn, or at least analogous to Neverborn, and the Living Saints are analogous to demons, in that they are warp entities of considerable power who just get that power through different avenues. And the Emperor's avenue or connection or signal, or however you want to phrase it, is sufficiently different to evade anti-warp and anti-psyker protections, like nulls, like blanks, like untouchables, like pylons and Blackstone and all that stuff.
Yeah. Actually, I think it'd be more of the nulls are the chaos spawn of the Emperor.
I'll go a step further. I'm going to go a step further. We're in some bold territory for me, because I typically don't step out and make these kinds of statements. Based on what we've been discussing so far, what would make sense to me is that the warp and the way the warp functions, that is a construction, if you will, of the old ones and how the old ones see manipulating reality. Okay. And that's why all the psychic species use that avenue to alter reality. But the Emperor and whatever he is and however he became a god, that is distinct and different from that entire paradigm, not just psychic powers, but the paradigm that was set up by the old ones, and sidesteps that, because it is not actually, it's related, it's similar to psychic powers, but it's not psychic powers. It's similar to warp entities and warp presence, but isn't warp entities and warp presence. It is operating on a similar set of fundamental principles, but does not use the same mechanics. Does that make sense?
I would argue that the keystone there is the Emperor's physical presence in reality.
Right, because he's not dead. Because he's a technically alive being.
Or even if you argue that he's dead, he is not. He's real. He's like a real physical thing. He exists. He does exist, unlike demons, which don't really quite exist.
Okay, so you're saying the Emperor is distinct and different because he exists in both the material world and the Immaterium.
Yeah. He provides a
bridge.
He is the only god that exists in both realities.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Chaos Gods exist as a whole swath of the warp. Their existence, their nature is an entire region of the warp. They are a ego that gives purpose, that gives greedy desire to some area of the gestalt mass of all emotions that have ever existed. The Emperor is a dude, but also he's that now.
This is why I wanted Vera on the show, everybody.
Also, we have gods of reality. We have ancient legendary gods like the Eldar. We have possibly even more ancient legendary gods like Gork and Mork, which we don't know if they're physical or not. They're more, I'm putting them in the category of legendary, as in we don't know if they actually exist or if they're just beliefs of their own creatures. Same with the Chaos God, not the Chaos Gods, the Eldar Gods, where the Eldar Gods might actually be the old ones, but it's their interpretation of the old ones. Yeah, that's a whole can of worms, but those gods I consider more legendary versus the real gods of 40k, which is the Chaos Gods, the Catan, and the Emperor.
But the Catan, Well, I think the point you're making is the Catan were purely physical.
Yes, that is the point I'm trying to make. While my camera fails to focus,
you're just a little blurry. So the Catan were gods in a purely physical sense. They did not exist in the warp at all, as far as what we know. Again, based on what we're told, this is what we think is true. So if that is the case, then we have an example of with the Catan and the ruinous powers, we have examples of deities or entities that exist wholly within one or the other, but not both. Whereas the Emperor could be in both, and that is unique. It seems to be unique to him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, we have gone in some deep weeds here, fellas. I like this. I like this a lot.
Well, that is the nature of the question, right? It's an entirely metaphysical one. It's like, what is the nature of this obvious effect from something that's like such an inward wish, right? It's the inner world affecting the outer world.
Not for nothing either, but faith is, of course, in our world, tied very strongly to one's own worldview and personality. It is considered in our world, faith is considered intimate. It is considered something that you yourself hold close and dear to yourself, and it is not something strangers typically interact with or debate, right? Because your faith is yours. And if you apply that same principle to what we've been talking about, it's not hard to see that as a window into quote unquote the soul. And thus the power of faith is more individual and is more tied directly to your own ideology, and maybe even the purity of your ideology, as we discussed with the Sisters of Battle. And maybe that's how things manifest, or the Emperor is guiding people towards that purity. Maybe the Emperor is choosing select individuals who have a role to play. Maybe it's more about fate and destiny than any intrinsic nature of yourself. What do you think about that?
I do like that, but I also like the idea that all the living saints are his children. Because there's something like what you said seems way too put together for what I expect for a harder question for Games Workshop to answer. If that makes sense.
I'm just like Vera. I'm trying to find a coherent thought that ties things together.
Although I do have a slight when it comes to the Emperor as a god, I always like the idea that there are two emperors. The one that is the older man, the one that the Sisters of Silence sees, the one that Horus sees during the siege, the one that Lion talks to, the one who can keep secrets, versus the avatar of the Emperor, which is the giant golden idol that looks like Nathan Explosion. And those of you that get that reference, you're heroes and scholars, and that was a great show.
I don't get it. Where it's from?
It's fantastic. It's from Metalocalypse.
Okay.
But I believe that the Emperor himself, the real Emperor, didn't actually want to be a god.
No,
but
I think that's clear.
But the thing that became the god was what he projected to everyone, which is, counts as an oopsie daisy. Because there's only so many times you can show somebody a 15-foot tall golden idol surrounded by much taller things that he's calling angels before you go, that might be a god.
I have a feeling we could probably get Phil Kelly, Dan Abnett, and Aaron Dembski-Bowden on this same show, and all three of them would have a different answer.
I would love to sit in on that cat fight. Like, that would be, I would be sitting here just like, yay. And then I'd be like, once they calm down, I'd be like, what about this theory? And then just scurry back.
So here's the follow up, I guess, for you two ladies is where does faith go from here? Because we've been getting more and more examples of miracles happening. The living saint Celestine has played a major role in the current lore, and it's going to play an even larger role as we go forward. We're going to see new models. We're going to see new events, new elements. We've actually speculated that Armageddon might be a chance for Gork and Mork to manifest more types of orcs or manifest more directly in the material world. So there's opportunities in the storyline for faith to become a more central aspect. Do you think that's going to happen? And if so, how?
I think we're going to see a dramatic schism.
Can this follow?
Like proper ripped in half ecclesiarchy.
Okay.
An ecclesiarchal civil war would be really interesting because, okay, hear me out. I think that Gilliman is eventually going to rewrite the Lectitio Divinitatis to take out the most extreme examples. And that's going to cause a schism between the Sisters of Battle and the Ministorum, where the Sisters are actually going to side with Gilliman.
Yep.
Because Gilliman is closer related to the Emperor, and they see him as divine. Like, literally, some sisters look at him like he's a god. Not Morvenn Vahl. Morvenn Vahl just looked at him, which surprised Gilliman. She stared him down.
He was probably pleased.
He's like, yes, someone to talk to. Oh my god, it's been so long. But I could definitely see a schism between them that results in a civil war that's written in 3 paragraphs and never explained.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
That or a book.
Yeah, it's either going to be a really, really, really thought out book, or it's going to be 3 paragraphs and then it's going to be back to the norm.
Well, we had the Age of Apostasy already, where we had some pretty
but
major...
what about Second Age of Apostasy? The sisters could beat the Imperium twice.
Wow, cool.
Meanwhile, fucking Abaddon's sitting over there like, oh, I could have just done that. I could have just walked up to... Oh, God damn it.
Well, I suppose a part of the discussion was, there's been manifestations of the Emperor in the books about the Plague War, for example, showing up to burn Nurgle's garden. We have the Emperor's sword and the Emperor's shield are out and about in the world, with the lion with the shield and Gilliman with the sword. So, this is, as is being pointed out by chat, this is why is Gamora?
Yeah.
This is the why is Gamora question. Are we seeing a resurgence of the Emperor's presence through acts of faith, and how is that how do you feel like that's going to change the setting?
So I think the setting is at a tipping point where chaos is winning. At the current moment, chaos is winning. They've ripped the galaxy in half, at least according to chaos and according to the actual lore, even though the orcs believe that it was Gork and Mork that punched Gork in the tooth and he spit out, and that's what created the rip in reality, which is why it's called Gork's Grin. But aside from that, the Emperor has been manifesting a lot more. The Legion of the Damned has showed up more now than they ever have in the lore before. They showed up in 3 editions prior to this one. And one of those was like a small transitional appearance where they're just like, we remembered these guys. Okay, they're gone now. You can't play them anymore.
One of them was a one-off special edition miniature back in the day.
Yeah. And it was like a mail-in order. It wasn't even like a store model.
Right.
But them showing up a lot more. The Emperor has been showing up a lot more as a child, which is just kind of weird. Sure. I guess it's supposed to represent purity and whatever, but it feels weird. But the Emperor possessing one scene that I do want to talk about from the end of Plague Wars is the scene where the Emperor possessed spoilers. It's been like 4 years. I don't think I need to give a spoiler warning, but someone's going to be mad at me. The Emperor possessed Gilliman's body after Gilliman died because somebody stabbed him in the throat. That's Guilliman's ultimate weakness. You would think he'd put armor there, but he doesn't. God forbid they use actual armor. But when Guilliman dies, he gets possessed, and Mortarion gets yelled at. But while the Emperor is yelling at Mortarion in the form of Guilliman while stepping upon the Garden of Nurgle and burning a whole portion of it, Nurgle flees in terror of the Emperor. He's also mad at Mortarion for succeeding, which is a hilarious plot point, and I absolutely love that because no one had faith in Mortarion. That's just funny. But the Emperor says that he could save Mortarion. And that makes Mortarion hesitate. And he eventually does go, like, the Emperor orders him to go back with Nurgle. So I'm wondering if the Emperor's stolen knowledge was actually a way to betray each of the Chaos Gods to get his sons back. Now, that'll never happen in 40K's writing. I'm sorry, it just won't. The story will not progress to that point where we get a redeemed Mortarion. But that would be a story I would read the shit out of. That could be a whole saga in itself. That could be the new Horus Heresy. Like, here's 47 books about 3 Primarchs coming back and Magnus killing himself.
I would read a story about Mortarion's redemption, and it would have to be a really damn good story.
Yeah.
But I want to read that.
Well, if we agree with principles about the Emperor being able to take part of the warp, take part of the unreal space, the Immaterium, and we believe that demon Primarchs are kind of like demons themselves, kind of made up of the Immaterium, then theoretically the Emperor could seize those as well, like take dominion over them.
Mm-hmm.
I like Vera's view of the warp as this big turf war where, like, the Jets and the Sharks are dance fighting in there.
That's what it is, though.
The great game is very simple in some ways.
But even in the Emperor's domain, within the Celestine book, there are greater demons of the other gods, which is something super fascinating because they're separate from the gods, which is cool in my opinion.
Is it possible, though, that those are like symbols of demons rather than the demons themselves?
Oh yeah, it definitely could be. We have no idea how any of that actually works.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much true for this entire podcast.
Yes, but that's what makes it really fun.
I like the speculation aspect of this. And I like that we've come up with some ideas, I think, that are very, they recontextualize a lot of things for me. And that's one of the joys, I think, of this show, is that we're able to sort of tell people, hey, what about this? And that suddenly changes like a lot of things that you have previously thought about Warhammer 40,000.
I also wish my camera would focus. I've been toying with it for like 10 minutes and it still won't focus. It is focused on something in the background and I can't find out what. I think it's my dishwasher.
Yeah. But you can see why I wanted Vera to come along, because her insights have been invaluable here. And yeah, so Vera, final thoughts about the Emperor and faith. Where would you go?
I think that
I fixed it.
Yeah, let's go.
Sorry, continue.
I think that the Emperor provides a unique storytelling opportunity. I think that the Emperor's very nature is exceptional in 40K and makes him a neat thing to focus the story around. I think that faith is important thematically, and that the exceptions that arise because of pure faith are important in all sorts of places in the story. I think that I'm quite curious to see where these depictions of the Emperor as an active presence are going to go, because they challenge so much about the faith as it's established, and that's great. I think we have honed in on things that make sense here. I think that the direction the story is headed aligns to a lot of themes. I think that I am excited to see where things go.
I should extend a huge round of gratitude to Vera for joining us here on the show. If you like what Vera has to say, you can check her out on the Lorebeards and Role-Playing channel, where she and I will talk about tabletop games. or the Lorebeards book club channel, where she talks about books with Lindsay. And her insights are, I think, pretty interesting to listen to. So appreciate you for joining us today, Vera. You've been
Thank
great.
you so much.
Now, Alexis, what about you? What are your final thoughts on the Emperor and Faith?
Ooh, okay. I do wish that we had consistent abilities throughout the book. Specifically with specific characters. Like, I don't mind that the faith-based powers are all over the place. But I do wish that we had, like, here's the ones Celestine has that she uses the most often. Here's the ones Ethereal Stern has. Here's the ones, the girls that get resurrected that aren't as strong as Celestine or Ethereal Stern. Because those two are arguably the strongest in the lore right now. Because, like, if you read those books and you take some of their feats out of those books, it's like, well, why doesn't Celestine just blitz every enemy in the entirety of 40k and murder them so she could fly faster than light? But I think that the powers of faith are based on the needs at the time versus a power that they just have. And like that's how I take those stories. I don't read them like a power scaler going, well, Celestine can fly faster than the light, so she could definitely beat Goku in a fight. I'm not one of those people, but I just wish that we had consistent abilities. But this is, again, my argument with force fields in 40k being extremely rare and never working at all, ever. Like, even the goddamn Blade Guard veterans, they use their shield as a shield, and I was just like, it's a force field generator. It's also a shield, but show the damn force field. Like, have a las cannon shoot it. Have the tank shoot it, and they block it with the force field. But that's just me. That's the whole writing, you know. And I don't get mad at writers or anything like that, except Abthorpe for writing demons into the, into War in Heaven, which makes no sense. And then I get to piss off Ross every time I mention time always existing. These are jokes, obviously. We love each other. But overall, I do think that faith in 40k is the second most interesting thing in all of 40k. The first being demons. I mean, I got demon tattoos for a reason. I love the way 40k, a sci fantasy, does demons more than any other setting in all of fiction. I think they do them right. I think they make everything evil. I love the fact that there is faith in 40k and it's still evil. Like, all of these people putting their faith into the Emperor and all of this, like, they expect him to do great things and protect him. And ultimately, all their faith is rewarded with the chance of being dead in his realm as a skull. That's it. That's your ultimate fate as a loyal subject of the Emperor. Unless you are a on-fire space marine, a beheaded Primarch, possibly the Emperor's daughter, and something. Stern.
Wait, Alexis, are you saying that putting your faith in a profoundly flawed man is a bad idea?
It turns out that they make terrible ideas and they do horrible, horrible, horrible things consistently. But the faithful will constantly believe that it's for the greater good, even though it costs them a fortune. I am talking about Warhammer right now. I am not talking about things that are currently happening in our current events in any way, shape, or form. This is not connected.
No,
of course not.
No reflection whatsoever. No.
Yeah, no. Just profoundly evil people in positions of power getting blind faith thrown at them has never been bad.
But
40k is an intentional unintentional satire right now.
Yeah, we got a comment from Leslie. So are you sure about that?
Look, I am at least 13% sure.
So for me, I think faith is a fantastic mystery that is fun to theorize about. But I don't again I don't think we'll ever get a solid answer, and I think that's a good thing. But I also think so. My perspective on this, of course, is through a lens that is one that is very aware of the real world's challenges that Games Workshop has gone through, leadership changes and direction changes, and even tone shifts. If you look at Rogue Trader, the first edition of Warhammer 40,000, it's a very different tone than what we have now. Even second edition is a very different tone than what we have now. So I feel like faith from that. So from a certain point of view, to channel some Obi-Wan, and I know I'm not lying to you, this is literally about a certain point of view. Then from that certain point of view, then faith, the way that faith works is writers desperately trying to gather very different viewpoints on how it works and what it is, and trying desperately to make something coherent and cohesive and logical and consistent that it has never been there before. Like it's this is something a lot of people that work with Star Wars have to do sometimes, is they have to try and gather strands of lore and try to find something that makes sense out of dozens or even sometimes hundreds of creators. Now, that's the real world aspect, which is the most boring aspect. And I wanted to bring that up and get it out of the way first, because Lorebeards 40K is not a place you come to learn all the boring stuff. You came here to learn the cool stuff. And in the cool stuff factor, I love the idea that the Emperor has unwillingly become the thing that he didn't want to become. I love the idea that the Emperor knew that this was always a chance, this was always a possibility, and he became the god anyway, not because he wanted to, but because everyone else was like, this is what it needs to be. This is part of human nature. It is inevitable because we as people desire something to believe in that's greater than ourselves. And that's what I like about where that goes. Now, you have a response, please.
I do. Okay. All right. Hear me out.
You said the thing.
What if this was Malkador's plan the entire time?
Well, Malkador and the Emperor had a lot of... They definitely had plans, and they were both contemporaries, and they both knew each other extremely well, and they knew each other for thousands of years. It's not out of the question to suggest that they were aligned in a particular endeavor, which could have been... This could have been a plan of Malkador's. I certainly don't think it was the Emperor's plan. Let's put it that way.
No.
But Malkador having some sort of fallback or contingency, that's not out of the realm of possibility. But I will say that I think that faith as a representation of how to fight demons, it is a natural fit for the grim darkness of the far future. It is absolutely it is in some ways a refutation of the grimdark, but at the same, or even undermining the grimdark in some ways, but it is also rewarding fanatical zeal, which is something that 40K has always wanted. It's always dangled that as like, fanatical zeal will get you what you want.
Well, yeah, like what makes it grimdark is that the Emperor, despite becoming a god and like inspiring this faith that really does help people, is a eternal prisoner to the deific nature that he's inherited from all these people who are doing the one thing he asked them not to.
Yes, exactly. And that is so core 40K that it is like a polished, shining jewel of a foundation stone. And that's why I love it. That's why I love the fact that we're discussing it so deeply, because this is absolutely one of the major pillars of the setting.
I also love that the Emperor himself, like, he had to do it because if he died, the humanity would have ended. If he lived, humanity would have fall into chaos. So he was in a unwinnable situation, and he had to cast off his humanity to become the god that the humans needed. And it's all against his will. It's everything that he hates, and it's ultimately not rewarded. Like, I guess a reward is not being eaten by demons.
Well, he played it so that the biggest loser was him.
Yeah, you played yourself.
I mean, you know,
as
he certainly did.
DJ Khaled would say. Why don't we look at some of our comments? Because the chat has been going crazy. By the way, if you want to, become part of our community on Discord, you can find us. We have a cool Discord link that I'm sure Lord Vorn or Hawk can put up. And you can come join us and be part of our Lore Seeker community. We appreciate you. And if you've enjoyed this deep dive into the grim darkness of the far future, please hit that like and subscribe button so you can spread the heresy through the algorithm to other minds who need to know what's going on in the Warhammer universe.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a great comment. Micah says, since in fantasy, gods and magic are real, faith over there makes complete sense. But in here, I assume he's talking about Warhammer 40,000, even though there are gods, it's still complicated.
I think that has to do with the nature of the gods in 40K, where you can't pray to the, okay, so you kind of can, but you can't pray really to the Catan. They're not going to answer your prayers sometimes. They're not going to answer human prayers sometimes. God damn, I just walked myself into a giant corner with that one. You know what? Never mind. I failed immediately. Because I was like, in my head, I'm like, humans can't pray to the Catan. The machine god is literally a Catan. Okay, well, they've never prayed to the outsider. Oh wait, yes they have. There goes Kovu. They can't pray to the Nightbringer. Well, except they kind of can. And they might answer, which is horrifying if you have a shard of one of them.
Well, if the theory that the hive mind is a god is correct, that casts the gene stealer cults in a whole new light.
That makes them so much scarier, in my opinion. Because imagine being a gene stealer cultist. You have absolute faith, and maybe they're using both faith and the warp to find you. They are building up your faith so that they can track it.
Well, it does seem like we've come to this place in the discussion where there's the power of faith, and then there's the power of the Emperor's faith, because they are separate things.
Mm-hmm.
Because faith in the Chaos Gods and faith in the Tauva, that's different. It works differently.
Yep.
It's a fascinating thing we've come to. Here's a quote from the Eternal Crusader. He says, "In the End and the Death," which is the final book of the Horus Heresy novel series, "the Emperor split his soul and sent his goodness, quote unquote, into the warp. Faith empowers souls, so when billions upon billions of people worship the Emperor, this energy empowers him." And we have discussed this in our discussions.
I don't think it was his goodness, it was his humanity that he cast off so that he could kill Horus. And it's his final gambit. It's the thing that lets him kill him. Because the Emperor realized that Leman Russ couldn't kill Horus because Leman Russ cared about him. The Emperor needed to kill Horus, and he needed not to care about him. And even at the end of it, it still broke him both physically and mentally. We're still not saying the Emperor is a good guy, by the way. He's still a villain.
No, profoundly flawed at best. Profoundly flawed. Then we got this comment from Ricardo Andre. He says, "Just believe. Believe in whatever you like. Believe in the Emperor, or believe in yourself, or in whatever light you see in your dreams. Believe in me for all I care. Just believe."
All right, calm down there, Zinch.
This is a quote. This is a quote from Aullianus Pius, or All Person, as he's known in the Horus Heresy. So this is not just some guy. This is a perpetual who may, in fact, be older than the Emperor, saying this in a novel. So it's tertiary canon, but it's important.
It's in a really good novel, though, so that makes it more canon.
I mean, the quality does seem to have an impact on how meaningful stuff in a novel tends to be. Let's put it that way. Nobody's going around quoting the C.S. Godot books. Let's put it that way.
I mean, I did, because they're hilarious, to point out that they're dumb.
Multi-lasers. So many multi-lasers.
Also, Space Marines should actually be walking around with multi-lasers. It's a weapon that makes more sense than a bolt gun.
Rush 21129 says he wrote the book first. I think he's talking about Lorgar and the Lectitio Divinatus. It's a great scene from Talon of Horus when Abaddon first learns about the Imperial faith. Yeah, I bet that would be interesting. What was Abaddon's reaction? You may know.
I will admit I don't remember. This was a book before. No, wait. Actually, Talon of Horus was a really good book. That's Aaron Densky Bowden. God, that I'm just drawing a blank.
Well, we'll have
I
to.
apologize.
I haven't read that book yet, so I can tell you.
It's insane. Like, Aaron Densky Bowden is just an insane writer. All of his books are just like really good. He took a complete joke like the Night Lords and made them actually cool.
For people who don't know, Aaron Densky Bowden is also a big role-playing game fan. He does a lot of role-playing in his spare time, and he and I worked together on Wrath and Glory to create the setting for Wrath and Glory, the Gilead system. Now, we've got a comment from Rothian Fairman. Lorebeards, do you ever wonder if Khorne gets onto Karanak for dragging his butt across the path of glory?
So, there is a funny story I could tell you about Karanak. So, when Magnus trapped... when Guilliman was heading back to Terra, during his crusade to Terra, Magnus managed to trap him on a station, and in that station, he sent Shalaxi Hellbane and Karanak, along with Skarbrand, to go and kill him. Okay, and the fight was going insanely well until an incident involving Shalaxi Hellbane and Karanak happened, and Shalaxi kicked Karanak out of her way, and all of the Khorne demons just turned and went, "Oh, hell no, you don't kick a dog."
That's right.
It's not exactly like that. It's just described as an incident, but it's definitely just she kicked the dog.
So the Emperor should avoid shooting Khorne's dog.
Yes.
We don't need John Wick Khorne.
Karanak apparently has the strongest brass collar of Khorne, and anyone who wields it can become completely immune to powers, like all psychic powers, including Tzeentch's strongest spells.
But not faith.
Yeah, maybe not faith.
And we got one from Scar, Prince of the Parade. Says, the thing I want to point out, Archeon being the 13th ever chosen, would all things considered kick Demon Horus's ass. Okay. He fought Sigmar and Nagash post-godhood. Nagash is easily stronger than Horus. Okay. Being a wind of magic by himself. So in my mind, Archeon would take control of Chaos in 40k and would likely start another End Times. I feel like your bias is showing a little bit, Scara, but you know what? If you like Abaddon, I'm sorry, if you like Archeon better than Horus, I'm not going to stop you. That's a perfectly legitimate attitude.
We got to do Runestorm demons versus demons of the winds, which is a really weird comparison considering Runestorm demons couldn't die, and Horus had that power and couldn't die. So it would just be an attrition match until Horus eventually got a killing blow or got severed from the Chaos Gods, which the Chaos Gods would sit on the sidelines just going like this, yay, fighting, violence.
We're just about out of time for this episode, so I want to ask Vera if she would like to tell anybody where to find her on the interwebs, where you are a doer of things.
Sure, yeah. You can find me on Lorebeards on Mondays around the same time. You can find me at Vera Samilla on Twitch. I stream pretty regularly, like around 3 times a week. And yeah, I'm out there. I'm on YouTube. I post stuff there. I've got some long-ass video about brain rot coming out soon.
Woo! That'd be super fun. I am going to stream with Vera on my channel called the Ross Watson. It's a Twitch stream if you want to check us out there. And we do Lorebeards every Wednesday and every Saturday. The Wednesday shows are typically our bonus shows. This was an exception. But this Saturday, we're going to have a poll up soon on YouTube for you to vote on what we're going to be doing on Saturday coming up. And then next Wednesday, you can catch us with things like Let's Build or What Ifs or tier lists. That's usually what we do on our bonus shows. Alexis, where can people find you on the interwebs where you're doing things?
Oh, on the internet. Otherwise, you'd have to find me in Iceland. You can just search this name on just about everything. I do a lot of stuff on TikTok right now. I post cat pictures on Instagram. I'm mostly just here at this point. I just chill and hit people with an axe on occasion.
Well, thank you to everybody who's watched us today. And yeah, again, I do encourage you to check out Vera and all of her great work over on the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay books produced by Cubicle 7. Check out Northern Queen Alexis. She is also a commission painter, an extremely talented one, in case you want to get your army done. Yeah. And you can find me. I have a Patreon if you want to check that out. Doesn't hurt. Where I talk about and produce a lot of role-playing nerd things like magic items and NPCs and interesting locations for your D&D games. But that is about it for today's show. So we're going to say thank you to our guest one last time. And thank you to all the people that showed up to watch us today. The Lore Seeker community, you guys are amazing. Appreciate you.
And remember, in the grim darkness of the far future,
there is only lore. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.